And we are live with today's pre-show of our 220-1102 Core 2A Plus study group. All right. We are just getting things ready. We'll be starting the actual study group in about 10 minutes. Got the clock counting down. I'm checking. Cameras look good. Stream looks good. So far, so good. I think we're in pretty good shape. Hello, chat room. Hello, everyone. Thanks for being here. Thanks for joining us. It's always a good day when we're doing a live stream. We always have a good time doing all of this. So now it's time to kind of get my act together. I think I've got pretty much everything here ready to go. Got lots going on. Hi, chat. Good to see you here. Thanks for being here. Thanks for joining us. Thank you, Google, for telling me about the event. What else is going on? We've got recordings are going. I already did the podcast intro. I think we're in good shape. I think it's now more about, I guess I need to put our question up. This question will open the poll. There we go. So that, and it would be good if you could see that too, wouldn't it? I'm just saying. Let's see if we can fit me in. There we go. So that'll give you information if you want to do that. So the folks in the chat room asking where you can purchase vouchers if you're in the UK. Unfortunately, I don't offer any discounted vouchers for countries outside the US or Canada. So sorry. So you'd have to buy direct in the UK or find a partner in the UK who is selling vouchers at a discount. Hopefully someday we'll be able to offer that. It's more of a money cost. It's not really cost. It's more about changing things over and really understanding where the best place would be to get or transfer over some of the dollars back from pounds to dollars and euros to dollars and won to dollars and yen to dollars. And you see how this works? See how it's going crazy? So there's always a challenge. And of course, there's tax implications on top of that and concerns about international, all those things. It's not insurmountable, but it's things that have to be considered before you start doing that. But we're getting there. We're slowly getting there. All right. Today's study group is all Core 2. So hopefully you're here for the Core 2 study group. If not, you could always hang out with us, though. We've got lots to go through. It's always fun to go through the questions. All right, that looks good. This is excellent. Where you can donate on Super Chat. I don't do Super Chat anymore, so I don't take your donations. Take that. I don't know why I'm being so indignant. No, I appreciate the thought, actually. It was just too much of a distraction. So instead, we sort of got rid of those. And if you watch the videos and if you get the notes and the exams and that kind of thing, you're supporting what we do here. So I would recommend you just do what you would normally do. And in the end, it works out great for us. So that's the important part. And I do appreciate the thought, though. Thank you so much. That is very kind. All right. What else have we got to do here? We got a lot to go through. I've got all these questions in the first hour for you, so we'll go through all of those in hour 1. And then, of course, hour 2, we just open up the phone line. Somebody looking for the Vevox ID, there it is, 133-384-004. Of course, you'll see it before we get things really going here. I guess it would be good if I showed the results from this. There we go. Now you can actually see where people are connecting from and joining from. We got some Canada up there. We got US. There's a little bit of Europe. There's a little bit of Africa. Can't see down here. Nothing in. We got a little New Zealand. Is there a dot there? It looks like there is. So there's lots going on. Look at that. That's fantastic. So that should get us to where we need to be. Will I ever be teaching the CISA certification exam? I don't know. CISA, it needs to get a little bit more activity, I think. It's just not working out. It is just not working out. Is there a Linux question today? I believe, let me think, I believe there is. I think there's some Linux questions. Malk is always asking about the Linux questions. Let's play is, yes, let's do Linux questions. And I think I do have some. In fact, I want to say it's today's performance-based question, but I'm trying to remember. I did these questions a couple of weeks ago. So that's the challenge. Today, the course, the study group is for the 220-1102, the 220-1102, the Core 2 study group. Core 2. Peace. That's what we're doing. We got lots to go on. I bought a 2.5 SATA SSD, David writes, just to try Linux with a secondary hard drive. Well, you could just put it in a VM. You wouldn't have to worry about that. But what fun is that, right? So what distribution for a dual boot Linux? Anything is kind of fun. They're all really good. And I guess it kind of depends. Are you planning to study for server administration? Are you planning to study for network administration, for just maybe a Linux desktop is what you're looking for? There's lots of great solutions there for desktop, but I would probably choose something different on desktop than I would for server, just because they work a little bit differently behind the scenes and above the scenes, as it turns out. Do I use Parallels for Mac? I do. I use Parallels. I also use, did I remove it though? I don't want to speak out of turn. I think that's the only VM I still have on this computer is Parallels. Although I was doing a VirtualBox for a while, which works great on Mac as well. I just figured we'll take it down to one single platform for virtualization. That was pretty good. Okay, we got about 3 minutes to go until we get started. Let me do one more final check of everything. These all look good. Those look great. I think we're in really, really good shape. I just need to work on the mic. The mic is in the way. Let's see if we can get me up here. The mic, I got to figure out, it's too high. It needs to come in low and come up high. And I'm trying to move things around and I don't have the right things in place. So that's what I'm doing this weekend is I'm taking it apart, putting it back together again. That's pretty much it. Have I used VMware? I have. It works fine. It works good. It's shiny. It's good. I tend to, for Mac OS, however, I find that Parallels has a much better integration between the VM and the Mac OS. It's so seamless, and you have a lot of control over what you can do with it that you don't really get with VirtualBox or with VMware on that side. So that's what we're doing now. That's what we're using, are all of those. What else we got? A minute and a half to go. I think we're in good shape. Every once in a while, goes through this. Do we have this on the screen? I do. How about this on the screen? That looks good. We should be able to then get Keynote running here, get a green light. Do we get a green light? Yes, we do. Very nice. All right. That looks good. That looks good. It's kind of bright. Turn it down just a tad. So I think we're in great shape. I think now the whole point is just to make sure that we can get this party going. And it's almost time to get going. This is our Core 2 study group. We will get session IDs for Vevox and everything else in just a moment. And we'll talk about what the next steps are for making all of this work. I think we're in good shape there. Yep. This is great when it's all working together, isn't it? And now that we're close to the top of the hour. Do we have top of the hour yet? It's right now. It's pretty much now. So we could do a live stream. There's a lot to go through today. We're going to do Core 2. We've got all new questions. Second hour's Q&A. I think we're ready. I think we're all lined up. So why don't we do a live stream, everybody? Let's put up a graphic and let's see if we can get this thing going. Here we go. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the October 2023 Professor Messer 2201102. That is our Core 2 A+ study group. Thanks for joining us. We have for you in this first hour all new questions that come to you live here from our studios, and they're specific to the Core 2 exam objectives. We'll talk more about those exam objectives coming up. In the second hour, I will open up the chat line and the Vevox to be able to take questions directly from you. So this all works pretty well whenever we get these things going. The fun part, of course, is that we're able to take advantage of this Vevox platform so that you can answer questions live and in real time if you are here when we're making this live stream. If not, you can still follow along. It doesn't prevent you from answering the questions that we have available for you. If you would like to participate, pop open a new browser window and go to vevox.app. That's an actual URL. It will ask you for an ID number. The ID number for today's event is 133384004. If you do all of that, there will be a question waiting for you on the screen. So feel free to have a look at those options and see what is available. And it's always nice to follow along. You can put in your vote and see if you get those questions right. I have for you a question to make sure that the Vevox is working as expected. So let's put that question up in Vevox so that you could see it. And I'll show you that the question asks, a technician at headquarters is controlling the desktop of a Linux server at a remote site. Which of the following is most likely being used? Is that VNC, MSRA, RDP, SSH, or VPN? So you have a number of options there. Now, our standing rule, of course, is that we do not answer the questions in the chat room. Please no hints in the chat room. And then we've got plenty to go through as we step through these questions today. This is a question from last month. We'll see how well you remember what the answer to this question might be, and we'll come back to this question in just a moment. We've got a lot to go through. Let me first welcome you. Thanks for being here. We've got a lot of activity going on behind the scenes right now. There's all kinds of new content being created, and I'd love for you to be a part of that. If you do want to follow up on what we're doing, make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel at professormesser.com/YouTube. Of course, we have our daily pop quiz questions on Twitter and Instagram. You can find those at www.professormesser.com/Twitter and /Instagram. So you have some options on some of these things that you can find us. We're always doing something behind the scenes, and it's always good to know when those new videos come out. Well, today we're going to be talking specifically about the 2201102 Core 2 exam. This is one of the two exams that you have to pass to earn your A+ certification. This is an exam that was also released on April the 20th of 2022. So it's been out about a year and a half almost, I guess. Is that about right? Year and a half? That's this is one that's not going to be retired, though, until November of 2025. So you have plenty of time as we sit here in October of 2023, 24, 25. Yeah, you got some time. You got a little bit of time to figure out if this is something you want to do, but make sure you get both of those exams done by that estimated retirement date. The Core 2 exam is 90 minutes long, and it is scored on a scale from 100 to 900, and you need to earn a 700 on this exam. It's a little bit more than the Core 1 exam at 675. And remember, regardless of when you pass those two exams, the moment you pass that second exam, you are certified for 3 years. So don't worry so much about when these retirement dates might be. You've got plenty of time, and as soon as you pass that second exam, you will be A+ certified for 3 years, and then you can, of course, renew that during that 3-year period. The Core 2 exam specifically, and the questions that we will cover today, cover these topics: operating systems, security, software troubleshooting, and operational procedures. So we'll get a mix of many of those types of questions today. We'll step through different types and see what you happen to know about those particular topics. We have a video replay of this available immediately afterwards. Once I hit the stop button, it takes a minute or two to generate itself, and then it's available on YouTube. During the next 24 hours, I also create an audio-only podcast version of this, and I post it as a podcast version that you can get on your favorite streaming service. You can go to Spotify or Google Podcasts or Apple Podcasts. You can also download it directly from our site. Go to professormesser.com/podcast, and you can add it to your favorite podcast listening program. There are many different services available for podcasting. They come and go all the time. But if we are not on your favorite service, let me know, and I'll see what I can do about adding it to that service as well. Also, let you know that about a day later, you will find that the YouTube video description has been updated. So if you're watching the replay right now, you might want to look at that YouTube video description, and you'll notice that there is a big list of all of the timestamps. Those don't happen automatically. YouTube's trying to make them happen automatically, but those don't work very well. Instead, my marketing manager, Lori, is watching this on the replay. Hey, Lori, how's it going? What are the plans for the weekend? How's the family? She's probably going through this about at a 2x speed and putting down those timestamps so that you can go back years into the past and be able to find exactly what you are looking for very, very quickly just by clicking on that timestamp. So thanks so much, Lori, for doing that. There's also a chat available on our site that is provided by Discord. That is the service that we use. If you would like to join us, and that's usually where we're hanging out, we're not in a live stream, you can find us there. Simply visit professormesser.com/Discord or click the Discord icon in the upper right on my website page. That's a great way to join us. We have a fantastic community of A+, Network Plus, Security Plus, and in general, IT professionals that like to hang out there. There are very knowledgeable folks there that can help you through your studies, and very often they're putting together live events that they can sit through and learn more about the topics that are specific to the Core 2 exam. So make sure you check that out on Discord at professormesser.com/Discord. Also let you know, eventually you will need to purchase a voucher for your exam. You'll need to take this exam. Now, you could, of course, go directly to the CompTIA website and pay full price. But why would you do that? Wouldn't you want to save some money? If you're in the U.S. or Canada, you can save money on your voucher by visiting professormesser.com/vouchers. And I have a number of vouchers there for all of the CompTIA exams, and all of them are already discounted. You don't need a discount code. You don't need a plugin or some type of extension in your browser. You don't need to know a secret passphrase. They're just already discounted on my website. Makes it very easy for purchasing your voucher. Might be a good way for you to save a few dollars before you walk into your exam. And if you purchase from my website, I will give you a free copy of my Exam Hacks ebook. This is a book that I wrote that has a list of tips and tricks that can help you with your studies, and it can give you some techniques to improve your score during the exam itself. If you think that might help you, then maybe you would like to purchase a voucher on our site. The only other way you can get your hands on that Exam Hacks ebook is to purchase a copy of our Success Bundles. We don't offer it as a separate sale. So this is something you can only get exclusively through a Success Bundle or through a voucher. Find out more about that at professormesser.com/vouchers. Well, let's go back to that question I asked earlier, which was, a technician at headquarters is controlling the desktop of a Linux server at a remote site. Which of the following is most likely being used? Is it VNC, MSRA, RDP, SSH, or VPN? Now let's see how you did with this one. We're going to close our poll and see what the voting shows us. And we can see that 35% say it's VNC, 30% say it's SSH, 27% say RDP, and then single digits for VPN and MSRA. So we didn't get a majority here. In fact, we got kind of a three-way tie for first place between VRC, RDP, and SSH. So there's quite a few. In fact, SSH came in 29%. So this question had a very similar set of results last month, as I recall, because we did not get a majority on that one either. The real keys for this question is that we are controlling the desktop of a Linux server at a remote site. So we already know that we're connecting to a Linux machine. So basically all the Microsoft protocols are off the table. We're not going to use those. And then we're also looking at controlling a desktop. So there is a graphical front end, if you will. Looks very similar to this. In fact, this is someone who is looking at and controlling a third-party desktop from that front end. So here's where the problem is. If it's Windows, you're probably using RDP. That makes perfect sense for someone working with the Windows operating system. But if you are connecting to Linux, you don't have RDP available. Linux doesn't support RDP services. So you would need to have some way to connect to some type of remote control service on that Linux device. And one of the most popular is using VNC, or the virtual network computing. It uses a protocol named the RFB, the remote frame buffer, to be able to send that desktop information. And it's available. Many different clients are available for many different operating systems. Many different servers are available for many different operating systems as well. Works across many different OSs, including Mac OS. In fact, it's basically built into Mac OS. So you can certainly download and use both servers and clients on Linux, and you can download both servers and clients on Windows as well, along with others that you're using. So what we were looking for from a remote desktop control perspective for Linux, it would indeed be VNC. That was the plurality of you that chose that one, the 35 or 36% of you that chose that one. It would not be RDP. We already mentioned we're connecting to a Linux device, so the remote desktop protocol from Microsoft would not apply, as would the Microsoft Remote Assistance method, which is commonly in Microsoft Windows 11, 10, and 11 for remote access to home and professional devices. SSH, of course, does provide you with remote access to a Linux device, but it's not remote control of the desktop on a Linux device. It's a command line. So SSH would not be the correct answer either. And VPN describes an encrypted tunnel that you would use to communicate. It does not have to do with controlling the desktop of a Linux server. Your only choice here is indeed VNC, and 35% of you got that one right. I think that was a good place to have a jumping off point whenever we start some of these questions, and I think that was a good one to start with. If you remembered that one from last month, then you did a very good job. Not a lot of us remembered that one. Of course, it's been more than a month, so I think we can give ourselves a little bit of slack on that one, since we did have a little bit of a delay in getting those done this month. But those are important to remember. Make sure you're familiar with the remote access capabilities, what the different options are, and all of these are listed in our remote desktop video. Make sure you become familiar with those. Okay, let's now shift gears a little bit, because I want to give you a question that's going to be similar to the questions you get at the very beginning of your Core 2 exam. For those of you not familiar with CompTIA exams, maybe you haven't taken a CompTIA exam before, the exam questions at the very beginning are not multiple choice questions. So, for example, the question we just did, where we had a question and there were multiple options to choose from, that's multiple choice. And in this question, you had a 20% chance of getting it right, even if you guessed. Well, CompTIA doesn't want to have you guessing. They want you to really know this content. So they are going to ask questions of you and present the questions in a way that are not multiple choice. So these might be matching, they might be fill in the blank, you might be put at a command prompt, you might be working towards some other capabilities in your systems, being able to work with other protocols. There's lots of other things you can do on the screen that would not be a multiple choice question. And indeed, this is one of those. That is not a multiple choice question. So let's see how we focus on that. What CompTIA calls this is a performance-based question, and I have for you a performance-based question to get us started today. So here is this month's performance-based question. It is a matching question, and the question asks, match the Linux commands to the descriptions. Some descriptions will not be used. And that's because we have 4 different commands and we have 6 different descriptions. So there'll be 2 left over at the end. Those 2 that are left over, by the way, if you want some extra credit, tell me what commands are associated with the descriptions that we didn't use. So there you go. So the folks that were asking for more Linux, you got a little bit more Linux into this mix to be able to work with this. So hopefully that's something that that you will like. So for those of you listening on the podcast side, let's step through the 4 different Linux commands are apt-get, ps, su, nano. Those are the 4 different commands. And the descriptions are run a script with elevated permissions, get the IP address of an FQDN, modify the contents of a configuration file, view a server's active processes, move a file between folders, and install a new application or utility. Those are the 6 different descriptions to which we will need to put 4 of these commands to. So there'll be 2 left over, and the 2 that are left over, maybe you can tell me what those happen to be. If you would like to answer the question, go to professormesser.com/QA, or you can visit the Vevox connection here. Also let you know for the Vevox that we will be taking questions in Vevox. So you'll notice there's another tab on the top. You can click and you could submit your questions for the second hour now. You don't have to wait until the second hour. You can submit them at any time, at any point in this first hour. And of course, you can submit them during the second hour as well. So there's a little bit of a choice there. You can at least maybe think of some things as we're going through here that you'd like to have answered. Make sure you put those in there. We will be going through all of those questions in the second hour, or as many as we can. I'll be looking at all the questions. We probably won't have time to talk about every single question, but we'll certainly go through as many as we can. So again, match the Linux commands to the descriptions. Some descriptions will not be used. And those descriptions are the commands are apt-get, ps, su, and nano. And the 6 different descriptions are run a script with elevated permissions, get the IP address of an FQDN, modify the contents of a configuration file, view the server's active processes, move a file between folders, and install a new application or utility. There's only 4 here. This is one also that you could get some right and some wrong. And one of the questions that tends to come up then is, do I get partial credit on something like this? CompTIA does have a frequently asked questions file on their website that talks specifically about performance-based questions. And what they say is that we might give partial credit or we might not. So they basically don't really give you an answer on that one. But ultimately, even if they gave you partial credit, you wouldn't know it because there's no way to see a question-by-question breakdown for number of points. So they don't tell you when you get your final exam score which questions you got right and which questions you got wrong and how many points were associated with that particular question. It's unknown. You will never know. It's a mystery of the universe that ultimately you will never, ever be able to discern. So don't worry about it. I guess is the moral to that story is sometimes they provide partial credit, sometimes they don't. Ultimately, you will never know. So in the big scheme of things, what difference does that make? Don't worry about the scoring. Worry about the content. Make sure you're familiar with everything in the exam objectives, and then it doesn't matter how they ask the question. You will know the answer no matter what they do. So if you're familiar with Linux commands, for example, you'll be able to answer a question like this, and it won't matter if there's partial credit or not. You'll do fine. That's my recommendation. That's my best practice for you to be able to do something like that. Let's step through this particular question and see if we can see what we think the answers might be. So I see a few of you are still putting those commands in, but we're going to start stepping through here to see what those happen to be. So those are our 4 Linux commands. Let's start with apt-get. Apt-get, and determine which one we would match with apt-get. I would match install a new application or utility. That is what apt-get happens to be. Certainly is one of those types of things that is a good utility to know, because occasionally you'll be working on Linux and somebody will say, well, let's look at a packet capture. Oh, I haven't installed Wireshark. Let me install Wireshark very quickly. Well, you could download Wireshark. You could compile it. You could then install it into your system, or you could simply use the apt-get command to simply get a copy of Wireshark and automatically install it into your Linux distribution. That is one of two different ways to do this, depending on your distribution. It's either apt or apt-get, depending on the distribution you have, or yum is another one that you might use to be able to install applications. It does it very quickly. It's easy to find. A very simple way to manage packages and applications on your Linux desktop. So hopefully that's one you already knew, was apt-get was to install a new application or utility. Let's do another one. Next on our list is PS. PS, it's not PostScript. PS stands for processes. And indeed, it lets you view the server's active processes in your system, your Linux system. So very similar to the Task Manager and some of the functionality you might have with Task Manager, PS gives you a similar view of processes that are running behind the scenes so that you can really understand what these might be. It's a great way to see what's really happening on the system in real time. And if you want to take it to the next level, although it's not part of this particular set of requirements you need to know, this is outside the scope of your A+, but I always like to use the top command as well. Puts things in a more of a full screen view and allows you to do some manipulation of the processes. But PS is great at the command line and perhaps even gives you more information than you would ever get from top. So it's very nice. Third on our list is SU. No, SU. No, SU. SU is the sudo command, or the su command. In this particular case, you would use sudo if you were running an application with it, which runs a script or utility or application or executable with elevated permissions. So if you think about the Windows side of things and you are right mouse clicking on an application and you can run that as an administrator, you recall that function inside of Windows, run as admin. Well, this is basically the same thing on Linux. I'm running it as an administrator. I'm running it as a super user. That's what the SU is. That root user or super user is the one that has elevated permissions. You can also use variants of this command to run an application as a different user, which may not necessarily be the super user, but you would run it as that user's rights and permissions, which is sort of nice for troubleshooting and doing other nice functionality, being able to manage the way that applications are running on your system. And these are incredibly useful. That's one I use all the time. That su and sudo command are incredibly useful to make that happen. The SU command pops you out into a separate shell. The sudo command keeps you in your existing shell and simply runs the utility as that. So I would accept both SU and su and sudo for that particular answer. Both of those can run a script with elevated permissions. Next on our list is nano. Last on our list is also nano. Nano. What would that be? Well, if you've ever had to edit a configuration file in Linux, then you've of course used Vim or VI, which is what you should be using. Let's face it, that's the appropriate editor, the one that professionals use. But if you're like me and you don't have time to remember all of those crazy commands in VI or Vim, you might also want to run nano. In reality, I use VI or Vim all the time. Nano is something I use when I don't have a choice that's not installed on that system, but it's a perfectly reasonable and very capable editor. And if you have to change a configuration file, modify a text file, make some type of change to your system, you're probably going to run Vim, nano, or a very similar type of editing utility. And I would certainly choose modify the contents of a configuration file as an answer to nano. One of the nice things about Linux is there are multiple ways to do many different things inside of Linux. So find your favorite editor and use that one. But for the purposes of your Core 2 exam, you'll need to know VI, you'll need to know nano. So make sure you're familiar with those. Maybe you don't need to know VI now that I think about it. You only need to know nano. So that's the editor of choice, I guess, for the folks for studying for their Core 2 exam. Now that means there were two commands left over, two descriptions left over. One of those descriptions was get the IP address of an FQDN. The other one was move a file between folders. So in the Linux world, what would we use to get the IP address of an FQDN? And indeed, this particular command is the same in Linux. It's the same in Mac OS, and You can even get a version of this for Windows. I like to use Dig. You could also, and I would also accept on here, an nslookup. That would be a perfectly reasonable example to use in here as well. Dig is just easier to write, so that's what I put into that list. But Dig and nslookup are both perfectly reasonable answers when you need to get the IP address of a fully qualified domain name, FQDN, and that's what that is referring to. It's when you ask a DNS server, what is the IP address of www.professormesser.com, and it gives you the IP address so that your browser can then go access my web server. So that's very common. In fact, if you have to troubleshoot DNS problems, and you will troubleshoot DNS problems, you'll want to use Dig and nslookup to help validate some of the information that you would be expecting from that particular DNS server. And lastly, move a file between folders in Linux. The best way to move a file is to move it. MV is that command. That MV command is one that will take a file and move it from one place to the other. This is also the command you would use to rename a file. Although that's odd to say that move is rename, why wouldn't it just be rename? Which I guess you could do. You could rename it. You could certainly do that. But the command in Linux is MV. You're effectively moving it from one name to another, if you want to think of it that way. MV is the command to do it. And so those are our 6 Linux commands that we were looking for. apt-get installs a new application or utility. PS views a server's active processes. SU runs a script with elevated permissions. Nano modifies the contents of a configuration file. Get the IP address of an FQDN, you would dig it, if you know what I'm saying. That's groovy. We would also move a file between folders with the MV command, move. That's what you would use. So hopefully that gives you some perspective of some Linux commands. Those of you that were asking for more Linux, we got you right out of the gate. So you've got all of these to go through. Now there are many more Linux commands that you need to know for the Core 2 exam. Make sure you go look at the Core 2 exam objectives so that you know what Linux commands might come up in your exam and become very familiar with them. And they're fun to run at a Linux command line. You can open a VM, start a VM on your machine if you're not running Linux already, pop open a command prompt and try out some of these to get a feel for what they might look like and how they might feel. And of course, I do give you an overview of every command. I demonstrate every single one of these in the videos that are available on my Core 2 course. So that's your performance-based question of the month. Hopefully that's given you some perspective. Let's now shift gears back to away from a performance-based question and back to a multiple-choice-based question. This multiple-choice-based question will give you a number of different options. This question asks, a technician is restoring from a backup using a full backup and 5 other backup sets. Which of the following strategies was most likely used to create this backup? Is that incremental, secondary, differential, cloud, or RAID? A technician is restoring from a backup using a full backup and 5 other backup sets. Which of the following strategies was most likely used to create this backup? Is it incremental, secondary, differential, cloud, or RAID? If you think you know the answer, please no answers in the chat room. You want to go to the link that's on your screen, vevox.app, and use the ID of 133384004. Or you can do this very quickly by simply going to professormesser.com/QA and answering the question there as well. Maybe that's something you know right off the bat. If you think you know what backup was used for this, make sure you head over to your vevox.app and lock in what you think the right answer might be. This backup section, there's a whole video on backups. There's a video on backups on A+. We don't do a lot of backup videos on Network Plus. And then we do a lot more backing up on Security Plus as well. It's such an important topic. You hear me talk all the time about how important it is to have a backup and maintain your backup and make sure your backup is up to date and make sure you do a backup before you perform a change. Backup. And so it's important to know these different strategies for backing things up. And this is one you should know as well. Lock in those answers. A number of you already put these in. I have a feeling you might know what this one might be. So we'll have to see what the results are. I try not to look at the results. I keep myself blinded from those until we actually look at them on the screen. Let's see how you did with this one. This question again asks, a technician is restoring from a backup using a full backup and 5 other backup sets. Which of the following strategies was most likely used to create this backup? Is it incremental, secondary, differential, cloud, or RAID? And let's see how you did. We'll close the poll. And we can see that 43% of you say it's incremental, 26% say RAID, 24% say differential, and then we're down immediately to single digits. 4% say cloud, and almost 1% say secondary. So there you go. Those are really the top 3 are the ones we're going to focus on: incremental, differential, and RAID. So the question, since we're working and restoring from a system that has a full backup and 5 other backup sets, from this list, we could really only be using one type of backup, and that would be an incremental backup. An incremental backup consists of a full backup. That's the first thing that happens, is we take a full backup, maybe on Monday. And then each day after that, we create an incremental backup from that complete full backup that we did originally. The incremental backup every day contains data changed since the last full backup and the last incremental backup. So this is creating tiny little slivers of new things every day. And so what's important about that, of course, is whenever we're ready to restore, we need not only the full backup, but we need all of the subsequent incremental backups. We have to put them all back together to be able to get the final restoration for this. And that means you could have a full backup and then a certain number of additional incrementals that you need to add on. I guess it depends on how long it's been since your last full backup. In this scenario, it was a full backup on Monday, and then we needed incrementals from Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday to be able to then perform a restore on Friday. So you've got a little bit more by focusing on this type of method of backing up. And incremental is the only one that would have those 5 extra, or in this case, 3 extra backup sessions. In our question, it was 5 extra backup sessions. It was indeed. And so it must be incremental. Indeed, 43% of you said that is the right answer. Incremental is what we were looking for. Differential is one where you would need the full backup, but you only need the last differential backup. So the maximum number of backup volumes you would ever be dealing with, or backup sessions you would ever be dealing with in differential, is 2. Well, in our case, we have a full backup and 5 other backup sets, so it can't be differential. Would not work. And RAID, of course, here is the part of the conversation where I get to explain and remind everybody, RAID is not a backup. RAID has nothing to do with backup. RAID is not a backup strategy. RAID has never been a backup strategy, and you should not count on RAID to be able to do anything backup related. So make sure you think about RAID from a perspective of redundancy and uptime and availability, but RAID does not provide you with a backup. So it can't be RAID. Interestingly, RAID was our second most popular choice at about 27% of you. But in fact, RAID could never be this answer because RAID has nothing to do with backing up data. We already mentioned how differential at 24% could not be the right answer. A cloud backup, that sounds like a good idea, but that's a very generic way of saying we're storing information in the cloud as a backup, but it doesn't describe the process or the strategy to get data into the cloud. What do you mean a cloud backup? Are you just copying files into the cloud? Do you have an automated process that puts them in the cloud? Are you storing it in long-term backup storage like AWS has with their services? They provide a long-term backup storage that you can use. But that doesn't describe how you're backing it up. It just describes where you're backing it up to. So cloud would not be the most likely process used to create this backup. And indeed, secondary is just sort of a term I made up. There's no primary or secondary backup process, or third tier or fourth tier, or in any case, was just something else I threw in there to see if we could have another term that sounded like it was a backup but had nothing to do with a backup. Not many of you bit on that one, because only 0.84, not even 1% of you chose that as the correct answer. Good for you, by the way, that was not the right answer. In this case, the right answer was indeed incremental. That's what we were looking for, and 43% got that one absolutely correct. Well done. Well, let's now do another multiple choice based question. Let's focus and see how we do with this one. This question asks, which of the following would be the best way to check the reachability of a network device? And I have a number of different options to choose from. Would it be traceroute, nslookup, ping, ifconfig, or netstat? Got a few to choose from. Which of the following would be the best way to check the reachability of a network device? Is that traceroute, nslookup, ping, ifconfig, or netstat? You think you know the answer? Follow the links on your screen, either at professormesser.com/QA or follow the vevox.app link on your screen to be able to lock in your answer. Please no answers in the chat room. Please no hints in the chat room. We're going to try to figure this out as if we are sitting in front of the exam screen, and now we are faced with this question that we somehow have to answer. You'll notice on the exam there are a lot of questions you get that are asking for the best answer or the most likely answer. And in some cases, what the first thing is that you would do in a particular scenario. Those are common things that you will see on the exam. So you do have to know, in the case of this question, you can't just know what the right answer is. You have to evaluate every single one of these possible answers and then determine of them which one would be best. Because I would say with this answer, for example, I know that there are at least two of these answers that could provide a way to check the reachability of a network device. But the question wasn't, what could you use? The question is, which would be the best one to use for that specific requirement? Check the reachability of a network device. So you do have to really look at this and look through every single answer and make a determination on which one would really be the best one to use for this particular scenario. I run into these all the time when I'm going through an exam and I read the question. I think, oh, I know exactly what I would use. And I go to the answers and the one that I would use is not in the answers. That's also a very common thing. So even though you know what you would use as the best way to do it, that's not the question. The question is, which of the following would be the best one to use? So you do have to look at what's available and make your decision based on what the different options are on this particular question with these possible answers. Let's see how you did with this one. The question again asks, which of the following would be the best way to check the reachability of a network device? Is this traceroute, nslookup, ping, ifconfig, or netstat? We're going to stop our poll and see how we did. The answers, by far, 71% of you say the answer is ping. That's what you would choose. It makes that sound when you use it. That's the ping. Traceroute came in at 18%, a nice showing for traceroute. I mentioned there were two that I would use, I could possibly use to answer this question. Those are the two that I would possibly use as this particular answer, and we'll explain why we would pick one over the other in just a moment. Netstat came in at 8%, nslookup at 1.4%, and nobody chose poor little ifconfig. So you do have options there on things you could do, being able to work through the different options on your screen. But if I had to choose a way to check reachability of a network device, and that's all I wanted to do, was, is the device reachable? That's all we want to be able to do on this link. We would use ping. Ping is specifically designed to test reachability. And if you ever work through and use ping, you know it's very fast. It uses ICMP. We simply send the ping command and we get a response from the ping. It's probably one of the first things you do when you sit down to troubleshoot is you start pinging your default gateway. You ping an IP address out on the internet like quad 9 or 8.8.8.8 and see if you can ping the host that's at the other end. So you have some different options there to choose from, but ping is a remarkably powerful tool. It's simple and powerful both at the same time. And what could be better than that from a troubleshooting tool? This is really where you focus if you're trying to find out, is a device available? Is it reachable on the internet? And if it's not reachable, you'll get a message back explaining what was the process or what broke down that did not allow you to reach that device. Pretty useful whenever you're working through those. So that is what I would choose, is ping. And in fact, most of you would choose it as well. 71% of you chose ping. You got that one absolutely right. Well done. Now, we do have a large percentage of you, 18%, that say the answer is traceroute. And indeed, traceroute would provide you with some information about the reachability of a device. The problem, of course, with traceroute is you have to go through the entire trace, looking at every route along the way to finally determine if that device on the other end is reachable. And so that makes it a little more complicated. And in fact, it's not quite as straightforward as a ping. There's a lot of other things happening behind the scenes. So you could be spending 10, 15, 30 seconds, especially if there's name resolution going on, 30 seconds waiting to get an answer when it finally gets down to that last device to give you any information about whether that device might be reachable or not. That is not a very efficient way to perform a check of reachability. That would be kind of difficult to make that happen. There are other ways. If a ping isn't working, if ICMP is filtered, for example, traceroute might be a better answer. There's also pings that use different protocols as well. So there's no message here. There's nothing in the question that says there's a firewall, there's a blocking of ICMP. This is really more of a generic question saying which of these really would be the best way to check reachability. And it would be ping, because you can check the reachability in a second, less than a second. Reachability is instantly known when you use ping. It is not anywhere close to being instantly known if you are using traceroute. And that's why I put traceroute at a distant second for this particular answer. Indeed, you thought it was a distant second as well, because 71% of you chose ping and only 18% of you chose traceroute, which is about where I would put it in my head as well. I think in this case, ping is the correct answer, what you would use. nslookup provides you with a way, as we mentioned earlier, to query a DNS server. That doesn't help you check the reachability of a remote device. The only thing it helps you know is, can you talk to your DNS server? And I guess if the network device you're trying to reach is the DNS server, maybe that would be the best one. But that's not the answer we were looking for in this case. It certainly is not one that tests the reachability of a network device. It tests the reachability of DNS, I guess, is the better answer. You've also got ifconfig. Ifconfig is great for showing you the configuration of an interface on your Linux machine, but it doesn't tell you anything about reachability of a network device. This tells you about the configuration of your device. That's not what we're looking for. And lastly, netstat. Netstat is one that can tell you a lot of information about network statistics on your device. So you can see what devices you're connecting to. You can see what devices are connecting to you, and a lot of other details as well. Netstat is a very powerful utility with a lot of different options, but we were just trying to check reachability. Netstat does not actively check reachability of a device. It is simply passively telling you what your device happens to be doing. So in this case, the best answer, by far, the one that really is the right answer, there really is no other good answer in this list, is indeed ping. And if you were part of that 71% that chose ping, you got that one absolutely correct. Well, as you can already tell, in this enormous list of things that you need to know, there's a lot. In fact, if you look at my A+ course, it's 137 videos long. There's a lot of detail in the A+ exam. And in fact, I tell people all the time, why don't you just watch all of the videos? It's only 19 hours of content. Well, that may not be something that makes a lot of sense for a lot of you. You may not have 19 hours, or you may not be able to get through every single video. So when you're dealing with this much information that's dealing with networking and operating systems and hardware and security and cloud technologies and remote access and scripting and everything else, You need some way to consolidate all of that into one single document. And that's what I've created for you in my course notes. This is a set of course notes. These are the digital course notes that contain everything that is in all the videos, all of the text, all of the charts, all of the important graphics. They are in here. So if you're someone trying to find a consolidated view of everything that's in those videos, those are in the course notes as well. They are available in that digital form and also in a physical edition. That's the physical book. You can see it's exactly the same as the digital version. It's just presented in a form that is printed out and sent to you in the mail. Now, if you get the version that is physical, I also throw in the digital version for free. So while you're waiting on this to get delivered to you, you can also log in immediately to your account, download the digital version, and already start reading it before your physical version shows up. And of course, you can put that digital version on all of your personal devices, so you have access to that wherever you happen to be. Those are my course notes. You can find out more about those on my website. Go to ProfessorMesser.com/1102 notes, or use the links at the top of the page for the 1102 exam and simply click the course notes. Let's keep going through this list and find a little bit more to look at. I've got another multiple choice question available to you. This next question asks, an attacker has obtained the session key of a victim by sending a malicious link in an email message. Which of the following would best describe this attack type? Would it be brute force, denial of service, end of service life, cross-site scripting, or tailgating? Got some options there. An attacker has obtained the session key of a victim by sending a malicious link in an email message. Which of the following would best describe this attack type? Would it be brute force, denial of service, end of service life, cross-site scripting, or tailgating? If you think you know the answer, follow the links on your screen to either the Vevox.app site, or you can quickly get there by going to ProfessorMesser.com/QA and see if you happen to know what this one is. This is, as I mentioned, in the Core 2 exam, there's an entire domain on security. For the purposes of IT, everybody in IT is responsible for security. If you're a database administrator, you have a responsibility for security. If you are an operating system admin, if you're a network admin, if you're a switch administrator, if you're a router administrator, everyone has a requirement to maintain the security of these systems. So make sure that you are familiar with all of these different security techniques. They are in the exam objectives, and so make sure you've got a copy of those exam objectives so you know what the possible attack types might be for this exam. It's an important one to consider. And indeed, that will certainly help you on Network Plus. It will certainly help you on Security Plus and other exams as well. So it's always a good idea to start memorizing and becoming a lot more familiar with the security side of things. And the Core 2 exam certainly requires you to be more familiar with that. Okay, let's see how we did. Slowly getting the answers in on this one. Not quite as fast as the ping answer that we had previously, but you're starting to get the answers in. Let's close out this particular poll and see if we can see what your answers are. The question again asked, an attacker has obtained the session key of a victim by sending a malicious link in an email message. Which of the following would best describe this attack type? Would it be brute force, denial of service, end of service life, cross-site scripting, or tailgating? And we can see here, if we stop the poll, your answer is 61% of you say cross-site scripting, 20% of you say tailgating, 11% say brute force, and then 4% say denial of service, and 1% says end of service life. Well, if you have received an email, there's a malicious link inside of that email, then you are probably one of the ways that this particular attack could be taking place is something that is a cross-site script. Cross-site scripting is one that uses a trust of a particular browser to gain access to data. Someone's effectively using you to get to that other device. And all they're simply having this work is they're sending an email that, or some other method, a text message, an email, anything that happens to have a link that points to some malicious code. In this case, a malicious script. So we send the email to the victim sees it in their email, they click that link inside of that email, that malicious script then goes out to a trusted website. This could be my banking website. This could be a website that maybe on eBay. This might be going to Amazon. It could be any legitimate site. So they're going to a legitimate site for something like that. And at that point, the script could be gathering information like a session key. It could be gathering information from that well-known site. It's loading in the browser. The script is executing. And now the information that was gathered by that script is then sent to the attacker. This might be a session cookie or any other information as well. So this is a pretty good way, very common way for attackers to take advantage of vulnerabilities on these third-party sites, especially a cross-site scripting vulnerability. Now, ideally, your browser is not going to allow this. Browsers already know that attackers are trying to do this, but occasionally the attackers will find a vulnerability in the browser that allows them to get around that particular limitation. And you'll see sometimes an update to Chrome or an update to Safari or an update to the browser you happen to be using. And that update has a cross-site scripting fix inside of it. That's what they're talking about, is something like this, having a cross-site script there. In this case, it would not be phishing. Folks in the chat room say, would this be phishing? Well, what did the attacker phish out of the victim? The victim may not even know that any of this happened. All they did was click a link, and behind the scenes, something happened. So this particular victim may have no idea that this cross-site scripting attack even occurred. So we really couldn't call that phishing in that point. It's not something where we can point to that and go, oh, the user knew it was happening. The user provided them with that information. They did not. They had no idea. That's one of the beauties of cross-site scripting, and one of the reasons why we like to patch cross-site scripting vulnerabilities very quickly, because a very good attacker can really take advantage of these types of openings. Cross-site scripting vulnerabilities are big. We want to close those up as quickly as possible for that very reason. And indeed, we've got 61% of you that say cross-site scripting. That's exactly what this particular type of attack would be, and that is indeed the correct answer. Now, 20% said tailgating. Tailgating, of course, is a description of how you can get into a locked building by simply following someone else inside. That is something that obviously is very important to protect against, and that is more of a social engineering attack because that's a human walking behind you once you open the door. Tailgating would not be providing a session key using malicious links in an email message, so that would not be our correct answer. 11% of you said brute force. Brute force is a way to cycle through every possible iteration, in many cases, of a password to be able to find that particular secret phrase or that secret password. A brute force attack doesn't involve obtaining a session key, sending malicious links, or doing any of that. So that would not be the answer we were looking for. Denial of service is an attack that keeps a system from operating. It denies the service of that particular device. In this case, everything's working. The user is clicking a link, and that clicked link provides an attacker with a session key, which is an extremely valuable bit of data. We're not bringing down any systems. Nothing is broken. Everything is still accessible. Therefore, this would not be a denial of service. So we can't put it in that category either. And lastly, end of service life implies or even tells us that this person is using a technology that is no longer supported by the manufacturer. Well, that doesn't seem to be anything in this question that points to an outdated technology, one that provides no additional support. There's nothing there that points to something that may be end of life or end of service life. So in this particular case, end of service life would not be the right answer. The one that is by far of these different options, of the following, which of those would best describe the attack type? Well, of the following, cross-site scripting is the only one that does provide any type of that. Now, could there have been a different type of attack to gain this information? Could this have been someone calling and saying, hi, we're from the help desk. Could you click a few things on your screen for us? Thank you very much. We're on our way. Well, that might be a phishing attack. But in this case, it was a different method that was used. So just because there is many different ways to get to that final view of this final result, in this case, we only have 5 to choose from. And of these 5, the only one that matches this particular answer is indeed cross-site scripting. That's the right answer, and 61% of you got that one absolutely correct. Well done. Let's do another one. We've got time. The next one on our list is this question. It asks, while troubleshooting, a technician needs to identify the total RAM and BIOS version of a device. Which of the following would provide this information? Would it be system information, task manager, Windows update, performance monitor, or system file checker? While troubleshooting, a technician needs to identify the total RAM and BIOS version of a device. Which of the following would provide this information? Is it system information, task manager, Windows update, performance monitor, or system file checker? If you think you know the answer, go to professormesser.com/QA, or you can follow the Vevox.app link that is on your screen. And of course, as always, please no answers in the chat room. Please no hints in the chat room. We'll figure this out as we go. Different options. And in this case, which of the following would provide this information is the most important piece that we need to answer here. So see how you do with this particular question. This is one I think that comes in handy, especially if you've never sat down at a machine before, you've never touched this machine before, maybe you're remotely connecting across the network to this device. So the real question is, what is the answer? How do we do with it? And what are the different things we can do to provide these details? We're not in front of the machine, remotely accessing it. What do we do? And here are the different options available. Lock in your answers at professormesser.com/QA or use the Vevox app that is on your screen. There's also a Vevox app that you can download from your favorite app store if that's something you would also like to do as well. So let's see how you did with this one. The question again asks, while troubleshooting, a technician needs to identify the total RAM and BIOS version of a device. Which of the following would provide this information? Would it be system information, task manager, Windows update, performance monitor, or system file checker? And let's see what you answered. And we'll close that poll. And it says 91% of you say it's system information. That's a pretty big one. That's a very large number if we're looking for an answer. It's an overwhelming number because now we have single digits for everything else. 4% say task manager. 3% say performance monitor. Almost 1% say system file checker. And 0%, sadly, say Windows update and what we're doing with it. Well, if we have to choose, wouldn't it be interesting if system information just wasn't what we were looking for? In this case, that was overwhelming. 91% of you gave us that information. Indeed, that's exactly what we were looking for, is the system information utility. Provide you with a great deal of information about the hardware that's in the system, the BIOS versions, the version of Windows that you're running, details about memory and storage. It's all in the system information utility. Tons of details inside of that. Here's a full screen of system information so we can really look at it. In fact, you can see here, we see what version of Windows we're running. We can see the operating system details. Here's our BIOS version. This question said total RAM and BIOS version. And here you can see the BIOS version and date is listed. In fact, I was running this screen in parallels. So the BIOS is the parallels BIOS. And we have, I mentioned memory, and right down here is the installed physical memory. It's 8 gig on this particular system. So just from the first screen that you get inside of system information, you can gather both total RAM and the BIOS version. It's in there. So that is indeed why 91% of you chose that answer, because of course it is system information. 4% of you said task manager. And although task manager does provide a great deal of information, especially real-time overviews of the tasks running on your system, it doesn't tell you a lot about the total RAM, at least not easily. There's a screen for that. but it doesn't tell you anything about the BIOS version. So Task Manager is not going to help you there. Performance Monitor is also a great way to monitor statistics over time. It takes metrics and samples of those metrics on maybe a 1, 5, 15, 30-second basis. You get to decide how often you monitor those stats, but it doesn't tell you anything about the versions of technology you're running, for example, the BIOS version. So Performance Monitor won't help you there. System File Checker is able to look at the core system files, the Windows files that are on your system, and it checks them to ensure that nobody's made any changes to those very important system files. So that's why for System File Checker, although a very useful utility and an important utility for checking the integrity of your operating system, it doesn't tell you how much RAM is in your system, and it doesn't tell you what BIOS version is running on your system. So System File Checker would not be the right answer. And although no one chose Windows Update, that's still that was probably a good reason for that, because Windows Update provides you with no information about the configuration of your system. It doesn't tell you anything about the RAM. It doesn't tell you anything about the BIOS version. It's probably the worst answer for this particular question. And you also chose that very well. You said, yes, 0% of you think that's the right answer as well. And in this case, you are absolutely right. That is the wrongest answer that you would have in this particular case. And so I agree with you. The answer is indeed the 91% of you that said system information. That's exactly the one you should be using. Well done with that. Well, I know we're at the top of the hour, but we do have time for another question. And I have a question that I want to give you that comes from my practice exams book. If you haven't seen my practice exams book, this is one I created because I started to look at the practice exams that were out on the internet. Many of them were poorly written. They certainly weren't written to prepare you for the actual exam. Sometimes, and many times, the questions that I find are completely out of date and have nothing to do with the latest version of the exam. And after I answer the questions in these online Q&A, I often find that they don't provide me with a lot of feedback on why I got a question right, or perhaps even more importantly, why I got a question wrong. So I decided to write my own set of questions that were guaranteed to apply to the latest version of this exam and does not apply to topics from older exams. What good is that? And then also provide you with a lot more feedback after you answer a question on whether a question may be right or wrong. Let me give you a feel for what this would look like. I have a question on the screen that is from my practice exams book, and we can go through this list to see what you think the answer might be. Now, I've got one on my screen. Actually, I think it's a topic that we already discussed, so I'm going to scroll down a little bit and use a different one here to be able to see what this is. So let's do this one. I have a question. This is from my practice exams book for Core 2, question A32, and it asks, an internal audit has found that a server in the DMZ appears to be infected with malware. The malware does not appear to be part of a file in the OS, and the malware is started each time the system is started. What type of malware would most likely be found on this server? Is it a Trojan, ransomware, keylogger, spyware, or boot sector virus? And you have the option when you are choosing these. This is a PDF file, so I'm going to turn on some annotation. So if you think you know what the answer is, you can select it on your screen, or you can highlight different things that are on your screen to be able to work through them. This is a PDF, so you can annotate, use a stylus or whatever you have available to work through these. You'll also notice that the answers are on page 33. Is it A, B, C, or D? You've got some different options there to choose from. You'll also notice that there is two different links here, one for page 33 and one for page 68 if you want more details. Notice that we're on page 12. So on a traditional book, and there are physical versions of this book available, you would simply turn to the page that has the answers on it. But since we're on this digital version, I've embedded these links on the page itself. So we can click the details. I'm going to click those details, and it instantly moves you to that page in the PDF. I've got a back button, for instance. I'll do this again. I went back, so this is where we started, and I clicked where it says the details, and it jumps me over to page 68, where it tells me this is the question, and then it says the correct answer is E, boot sector virus, and of course it explains why this is the correct answer, a boot sector virus. Now, of course, whenever I answer a question, I mentioned this earlier, and I get it wrong, I'm more interested in knowing why did I get that question wrong. And a lot of the practice exams on the internet don't even give you this information. But in my practice exams book, every answer is documented, whether it's a right answer or, more importantly, in my mind, a wrong answer. So Trojans, ransomware, keyloggers, and spyware were not correct answers. And for each of those, I explain why the wrong answer is wrong. In fact, I'll even recommend that if you go through this book yourself and you get the question right, I highly recommend you read through the wrong answers as well, because your exam might not ask you a question about a boot sector virus. It might be asking you a question about a keylogger, and I put information into the answer about keyloggers to get you more familiar with those technologies. So I highly recommend that you go through this list and become familiar with everything that's in there. Now, if you read the question and none of it makes any sense to you, well, then I've got a link at the very bottom that is a QR link and an embedded link to the video that this question was derived from. So if you don't understand the terms or you're not following the thought process of the question, go watch the video again, and I put a link directly to that video so you can find it very, very easily. And it's got a QR code so that if you have the physical version, you can simply find the QR code in the book. I guess if I find a page with a QR code, there they are. You can click the QR code, and it will take you right to that video on your phone. So a little bit more detail there to go through. And once you're done, of course, use your back button, go back to where you started, and you can go to the next question that's on the list. Those are my practice exams. They're available on my website. You can go to professormesser.com/core2pe, or simply use the pull-down menus on the top of my site to go to that particular page so that you can find those practice exams. And if you get the practice exams and the course notes at the same time, you'll even get a little bit of a discount. So that's always a benefit if you're trying to save a little bit of money. Find that on the professormesser.com website, professormesser.com/core2pe. Now, I also mentioned, as we've been talking about this today, is that there are detailed overviews, a complete description, a bulleted description of everything you need to know for your exam. CompTIA just provides this for free. It's on their website. You can find a link over to the exam objectives by visiting professormesser.com/objectives. You can also just go to your favorite search engine and type in CompTIA exam objectives. It'll take you right to the link. And from there, you can download these objectives and use these to be able to know exactly what's going to be on your exam. It is a complete overview. Everything is bulleted here. It tells you everything you need to know. For example, Section 1.6 is given a scenario, configure Microsoft Windows networking features on a client/desktop. You need to understand a work group versus a domain setup, including shared resources, printers, file servers, map drives. You need to understand the local OS firewall settings, including application restrictions and exceptions, and the configuration. So you can see that's just a few bullets taken directly from the exam objectives. Everything you need to know is in here. It is a great checklist, and before you go in to take your exam, you should use this to make sure that you've covered every topic that you could be presented with during the exam process. And again, as I've always said, if you know everything that is in here, you will pass your exam. There is no question. That's how close and tight they stay to these exam objectives. Download these today. They're free. Go to professormesser.com/objectives and follow the link to get you over to the CompTIA website. Well, we've gone through an hour of Q&A already, but we're not done yet. We have an after show where you can ask me questions. We'll talk more about that after show in just a moment. In the meantime, I did want to remind you that we do one of these study groups every month. There's always something going on here. And this month, we have two more study groups that we are working on. These two study groups that we have are the Network Plus and Security Plus. They are next week on Tuesday and Thursday, respectively. But if you want another A Plus study group, we have some in November. Our A Plus study groups are currently scheduled for November 7th and November the 9th. And then we have Network Plus and Security Plus later on in the month of November on the 21st and the 28th. Now, if you're wondering when the next live event is going to be, you don't remember the dates I gave you today, or maybe you're watching this video months later and none of this applies anymore, that's okay. You can still come to my website and look at the calendar. It is at professormesser.com/calendar, and that way you'll know exactly when the next live event is going to be. We also have an events channel inside of our Discord. So if you're already a member of our Discord, simply go up to the events channel. That will give you also the details of what you need to know. This is everything that we do that's live is in the calendar. And if any of these dates change, I change them in the calendar immediately. So you know instantly when something is modified or when something is changed. It all goes through that link at professormesser.com/calendar. Well, I know that we've gone through an hour of Q&A, but we're not done yet. We still have the after show where you can ask me anything you would like from the exam, about CompTIA certifications, about IT in general, or anything else that's on top of your mind. Stick around for that after show. It's coming up immediately after this. We also have, of course, our course notes and practice exams on our website at professormesser.com/1102success. Don't forget about our discounted vouchers. You may be able to save quite a bit of money by buying the voucher at professormesser.com. That's professormesser.com/vouchers. And of course, we have our Discord, our YouTube, and the other social media. If you ever need to find us on social media, you just type in professormesser.com/ the name of that site, /Facebook, /Discord, /Twitter, /LinkedIn, /YouTube. You get the idea. And if you don't see us there, then we're probably not there. And if you would like us to be there, let us know. And we'll probably put something there anyway to let you know what's going on. That can, of course, keep you up to date on everything that we're doing here, including everything associated with the latest exams, the additions to any changes that CompTIA ever makes, and of course, everything that we're doing with our live streams as well. We'd love you to always keep track of what we're doing there as well. Well, thank you for being here in this first hour. Stick around for the second hour. I'm going to take questions directly from you. We appreciate you joining us here. We will see you next time on the A+ study group. Okay. Let's bring up this other link. There we go. Now I need to bring up the Q&A that is on Vevox. I need to hide this so you can see it. That same Vevox that we were using earlier is the Vevox, oops, there it is the Vevox that you would use to be able to submit your questions. So simply go to your Vevox app that you've been using this whole time. You can also go to professormesser.com/QA or join at the Vevox app that you see on your screen at vevox.app. And you can see the ID 133384004. I'll be going through all of these different options, all of these different questions that you are submitting with the Vevox app. Maybe you can get more familiarity with these and the things that are available. A number of questions are coming through that are not specific to A+, and that's perfectly fine too. These can be questions about anything you would like to talk about. It does not have to be about the Core 2 or even the A+ certification if you do not want them to. In fact, we'll start with one that is not one of those. We've got a question that is about Security Plus, and this question is from Anonymous, who asks, Professor Messer, will you make new videos for the CompTIA Security Plus SY0-701? That's a good question because as I mentioned earlier, these exams are tend to be updated about every 3 to 3.5 years. And because of that, in this particular case, we're up for an update with Security Plus. CompTIA has already announced that there will be a new exam available for Security Plus on November the 7th. That's less than a month from now. And the new version of the new Security Plus exam is the SY0-701. And of course, I will have course notes. I've already completed the course notes for the 701. I've already shot all the videos for the 701. The practice exams are being worked on now for the 701. So yeah, there will be a whole new course available for the SY0-701. Most of it will be available on the first day of the exam on November the 7th, but there may be some things that have to be added afterwards, and that's relatively common when these things are released. It takes a while from the first day of the exam to start seeing all of the different publishers create and publish their content. I tend to have mine done very quickly, but you may find that other books, for example, for the 701, you may not see released for months from now, well into 2024. And that's just normal. That's just the normal publishing process. So don't worry too much if you're not seeing a lot of books out there. I will have all my videos. I will have my course notes. I will have my practice exams. But sometimes these other publishers do take quite a bit of time. It's just a very involved process for the large publishers to get those books out and be able to use them. But yes, we'll definitely have a new course for you. Do not worry about that. Along those same lines, D asks, well, how different is the 701? Well, that's a pretty good question. And it's a very broad question, because what's different and not different will depend on your perspective. Many of the exam objectives are different. In fact, I'm going to pull up a document where I went through every exam objective and I documented what has changed. And I just have a very broad percentage of what has changed. So on the 601 exam, it is a really big exam. It's a huge Security Plus exam. There are, if you were to count all of the bullets in that exam objectives, there are 1,038 objectives. Let's just say 1,000. Let's just say there's 1,000 objectives on the 601 exam. On the 701 exam, using the same counting method, there are 662 objectives. So already the number of things you have to remember is smaller, which I can only say thank you, CompTIA, for doing that, because 601 was ginormous, the 701 a little bit smaller. So, well, a little bit, it's 36% smaller. It's significantly smaller. So there are 63% of the exam is the size. So a difference of 36%. So a lot smaller in the number of things you need to know. But what about the objectives themselves? Have we changed a lot of the objectives? How much of the 601 was thrown out and how much of the 701 is new? Well, if you go through and you have to really map this objective on 601, did it show up on the 701 or was it thrown out? Now the next one, did it show up on the 701 or was it thrown out? So if you go through the entire list of 1,038 objectives on the 601 and you compare it to the 662 objectives of the 701, the new objectives on the 701 that are not on the older version is 338. So 51% of the 701 exam, once you get it smaller, half of that smaller exam, brand new. Topics that aren't even covered in the 601. So that's how different this is. So a lot of you, if you've been studying for the 601, I'll give you an example. On the 601, there's a lot of, you have to know the difference between EAP and PEEP and LEAP and EAP TLS or EAP SSL. There's a lot of different EAP flavors you have to know. They're all gone. Just have to know what EAP is. There's no significant large percentage of things you need to know, but there are new and more focused things you need to know. Well, here's another example. You know how on the 601 you spent time memorizing all of those command lines? Guess how many command lines are on the 701? None. Zero. Donut. Nothing. So what they've done is create Security Plus as a starting point, which is what it really should be. And then the next set of exams from CompTIA, the CASP, or really the next one would be the CISA Plus, the Cybersecurity Administrator exam. That CISA Plus is a good next step in the CompTIA world. That one has more of the hands-on piece of it. And then, of course, the higher end is the CASP exam in the CompTIA world. But they are really right-sizing Security Plus with the 701 exam. Now, if you're still studying for the 601, that is a perfectly viable exam. There's plenty of things that you need to study for that one and plenty of study materials available. So I would recommend you keep studying for that because you can still continue to take the 601 until July. That's 6 months from now, more than. So keep studying your 601. There will be people, by the way, taking their 601 exam in July. So don't think that you're missing out or that you should stop what you're doing and shift gears. I don't recommend you waste all of that time you've spent studying the 601. Instead, finish studying the 601 and go take that exam and get your Security Plus certification. By the way, regardless of whether you take a 601 version of an exam or 701 version of an exam, it's the same certification that you earn. It's Security Plus. And employers, they don't care what version of the exam you took. All they care is that if you're Security Plus certified. For example, you could have taken the Security Plus 10 years ago, the 401 exam, and you've simply renewed it every 3 years. You're just as certified today with your 401 exam you took as somebody who takes and passes the 601 today. And it will be just as valid as Security Plus as somebody who passes a 701 exam in November. So it's not about the exam version you take. It's about passing any one of those and becoming Security Plus certified. So I highly, highly recommend that you do not stop in midstream and redirect your efforts. All you're doing is putting more work on yourself because, as I mentioned, half of that 701 exam is brand new. So you will be restarting your process if you do that. I don't know why you would do that because you've got until July to take the 601. I think most people will probably be staying the course and focusing on the 601 exam, and that's what their efforts will be. And I think that's probably a pretty good way to focus your efforts and not waste any of the time that you've spent working towards earning that Security Plus exam or studying for that Security Plus exam. I think it's really important. So don't worry so much about the new versions. These tend to be obvious. If it's something where I'll just take the 701 and you start studying on those, that's useful. But remember, there's really no 701 study materials out right now. You won't find any because the exam's not been released yet. So as far as I'm concerned, there is no 701 exam yet. Doesn't exist. And only until it's released do we really see a 701 exam. And I think you should probably use that same philosophy when looking at different exam versions and focusing on those. So that's my recommendation anyway. You take into account all of these. In fact, download both the 601 and 701 exam objectives from CompTIA. You can look through them yourself. You make your own decisions about what you'd like to do. And you can decide based on where you are and what you're doing as to whether that's something that would make sense for you. Let's do some more questions that came in. Let's keep going. The question here, and this is a pretty good question. This is one that came up also in our chat recently. This is also from Anonymous, who says, when I complete my CompTIA A+ cert, I know it's good for 3 years before needing to be renewed. Yep, just said that, and you were ahead of me on that one. If I were to complete a course the year after I obtain the A+, it's worth 20 CEUs, which is what you need to renew your certification. Would that renew my A+ for 3 years from the date that I obtain the 20 CEUs, or 3 years after my initial renewal date? Thank you. You're welcome. The answer is that it doesn't take anything away from that 3-year version. So let's say you, in your scenario, you passed your exam a year ago. You've been working hard on renewing it. You got, in your particular case, you decided to compile CEUs to renew your certification. You submitted those 20 CEUs to CompTIA. Now your certification retires 5 years from now. So it's 3 years from the end of your renewal session. You add on another 3 years. So if you were to renew your certification the day after you got it, you would effectively have a certification that was good for 6 years. If that makes any sense. Yeah, they don't somehow, if you were really good at renewing and you renewed after a year, they're not going to take time away from that. They're going to add 3 more onto it. So now it's 5 years after that 1 year period. So that part's good. So people sometimes are surprised by that. And I'll get people that will send me notes and say, I just renewed. Now suddenly it's pushed way into the future. That's right, because they simply add it on to the existing date for the expiration. So it's just adds on 3 more years. If you renew again, it will add on another 3 more years, but you have to wait until you get into that second, third year session to be able to renew again. But that's a great way to do it. And I highly recommend folks kind of focus on those. I think it's another way to extend and not have to worry about renewing, because now you've renewed and you've pushed it out so far. So an important consideration and something to keep in mind when you're going through the renewal process, because it can very much help you quite a bit and understand what it happens to be. Let's do another question for these. I've got another different set of, here's a question. This kind of goes back to something we were doing earlier. I know Edward just kind of submitted this one now, but this is kind of a fun one to think about. And it's sort of a change to what we were talking about before. Edward says, I was playing with the nslookup command, since we talked about that in our study group today, and noticed when looking up youtube.com, I received 2 to 3 IP version 4 addresses. By using www.youtube.com, and that's sort of where this ends, but I have a feeling the answer was I got something different when I went to www.youtube.com. Yes, you did. And this is an interesting thing when you're dealing with fully qualified domain names, is that there is a fully qualified domain name of youtube.com. Now, if you have another fully qualified domain name of www.youtube.com, that's a different name. So www.youtube.com is different in configurations, especially on a DNS server, than youtube.com. Those can be 2 different devices. Those are 2 different machines because they are 2 different names. Now, of course, we could have them on the same machine. In fact, if you go to professormesser.com, that is the same machine as www.professormesser.com, but only because that's the way I configured it. If I wanted to have 2 different devices, one that is professormesser.com and another one that is www.professormesser.com, I could absolutely do that. And that's just kind of a quirk of IP. We don't even think of it that way, but that's how we do this. YouTube.com is one fully qualified domain name. www.youtube.com is a completely different fully qualified domain name. And you have to make sure, if you want IP addresses to resolve from those, you have to make sure that your DNS server has a record for both youtube.com and a record for www.youtube.com. Pretty important. So not a worry. Edward's saying, yeah, hit enter, it got posted, but I think we got it right. I think we figured out what we were working through there. Yeah, it's an interesting little quirk. And if you get into working with DNS servers, and you will get into working with DNS servers, you'll find a lot of these interesting quirks in the DNS servers and the way that they operate, because you sometimes forget that those are separate machines. Those can be separate devices, and they are certainly referenced and assumed that they are separate, which means you have to include that in your DNS configuration. And that's the real challenge, is configuring DNS. My recommendation is don't configure anything in DNS and you'll be fine. Actually, you won't be fine, but you'll be better than if you go in and start manipulating things. The only modify, here's really the ultimate best practice. Only modify DNS if you are absolutely sure in what you're doing. It is very, very easy to mess something up during that process. So make sure when you make a change to DNS that you have backups, that you know what that change is doing, that you have tested that change in the lab. I'm only telling you because I've had to deal with the consequences of this. So not the issue. As folks in the chat room are saying, is Dig only for Linux? It is not. It is available on almost any operating system. In fact, I have a video. I'm not sure if I still have the video in this YouTube video description, but it's a video on how to install Dig in Windows. So I have a video on that. It's on my channel. So you can just search for how to install Dig in Windows, Professor Messer, and it will bring that one up and show you how to do that. There have been some minor changes in the latest version of Windows and some minor changes in the download, but it's effectively the same process as the video I made a couple years ago on how to do that. Super nice to have, and an important utility to have. It's kind of nice to have it in Windows, especially if you go back and forth between Windows and Linux a lot. Sometimes it's nice to have the same utility on both sides so that you can easily compare those two and being familiar with them. Okay, other questions. We'll keep going through this list. This is, we'll keep going through here. I think I also answered the question from Ben, who in here was asking about your certification extending. I think we answered that. It's 3 years past your original date of expiration. And this one, this is an interesting one, though, because it changes a little bit since we're talking about renewals and how these work. Ben's question is slightly different because it asks, got my A+ in May, which means it will expire in 2026. Going for my Network Plus later this month. And this question asks, will my A+ extend to 2029 or will both expire in 2026 congruently? Well, as you probably are familiar, when you, and it's not in this question, so I'll explain it to others. When you take your A+ exam, you obviously you pass both of those exams, you're certified for 3 years. But you may not realize that one way to renew your A+ exam is to take the Network Plus. And one way to renew your Network Plus is to take the Security Plus. So one of the things that they do is that if you take one of those higher level exams, they sync everything up so that your renewal is based on the highest level certification that you have earned. So slightly different than that 6-year thing we were talking about earlier, is that ideally, in fact, in most cases, the way it has worked in the past is they've synced everything up to the date of renewal for your most highest level certification. So there's a little bit of that associated with it, but that should give you a perspective anyway of what you would need to know for your renewal. It does come in handy. That way you don't have to take your, you don't have to compile CEUs. You can just take a higher level cert and you're boom. You're certified. Now you're renewed your certification. Didn't have to do anything else with that. Other questions. Let's keep going through this list. Questions that are here. Speaking of renewing and certain exams and what they're doing, this question asks which exam you should take first and which one you should take second. This question is, can I study/write the Security Plus exam before taking and passing the A+ exam? Absolutely. There are no formal prerequisites for any of those CompTIA exams. You can take any of these exams in any order you would like. Not a problem. In fact, if you are in the DC area, if you're living in the United States, you'll find that a lot of the jobs in the DC area would prefer that you add the Security Plus exam. And many of those job descriptions don't even mention Network Plus or A+. That's because the U.S. federal government considers Security Plus to be one of the fundamental or most important certs that you would need to get into an entry-level position in IT with the Department of Defense. And because of that, many of the other agencies and companies that work with those agencies also require a Security Plus. So you see a lot of people getting their Security Plus in the DC area that have never studied or even worked towards the A+ or Network Plus. And why would you if all of the employers want you to have Security Plus? Of course you should go get your Security Plus before A+. In fact, you may not even go back and get the A+ at that point because they want you to have Security Plus. So yes, you can absolutely study/write those. It is an important consideration. And as always, you should take the exam that makes the most sense for what you're trying to do. Make sure you look at the job postings. Make sure you understand what the different options are from employers in your area and see what they're asking for. Now, obviously, if where you happen to live, if everybody's wanting an A+ cert, you should probably go get your A+ before you even consider doing Security Plus. But if you also look at those job postings and you see that 90% of the employers want Security Plus, well, maybe that's the one you should do first. You know, it's important to find a job and something you're going to do every day that you enjoy. So whether that's A+, Network Plus, or Security Plus related topics, find the one that you enjoy the most. But we also have to be realists about this. We have to choose the jobs that are available to us, and we should make sure that our credentials match the credentials that a prospective employer will be looking for. So that might require that you take Security Plus before you take A+. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's perfectly reasonable, and I highly recommend you pick the one that makes the most sense for your specific requirements. Okay, let's do another question coming in, and the other ones that are here. Speaking of A Plus and Security Plus, somebody mentioned in the chat room that they heard there's a 50% overlap in content between Network Plus and Security Plus. Does that sound right? No, it doesn't. But does it make sense to you? That doesn't make sense to me either. At most, with the 601, it's 10%. At most. But that 10% of overlap is a very broad overlap of topics. The focus on Network Plus is very different than the focus on Security Plus. So even though you might be talking about brute force on the Network Plus exam, the topics associated with brute force on Security Plus are going to be more involved. So you really can't even call that an overlap from that perspective anyway. So I really recommend you have a look at the exam objectives. They are very clear, and you can look yourself and see what the differences are. And I counted them up between the most current Network Plus and Security Plus, and it was about 10%. It's even less, I would imagine, for the 701. Even less overlap. And I think that's by design. I don't think that CompTIA wants a lot of overlap. In fact, there's a lot less cloud technology basics on Security Plus now. Because if you looked at the cloud section on A Plus, Network Plus, and Security Plus as we sit today, they're almost all overlapped. It's almost all identical. SaaS, SaaS, IaaS, PaaS, public, private, hybrid, community. It's the same on A Plus, Network Plus, and Security Plus. Not on 701. Very different on 701. So you'll see a lot less overlap as we go forward, and I think that's a good thing. Let's keep going through this list of things and talk about this. This is a good one. We've talked in the past about home labs. Jonathan asks, hey, Professor, should I be putting my home lab on my resume? Absolutely, especially the technologies that you are using in your home lab. You know, you wouldn't put on a resume, I run a home lab. There you go. Now that doesn't help anyone. But if you mention about, and maybe you don't even mention it as a home lab, you mention knowledge in technologies or technology focus that you have, and you can put down all of the things you use in your home lab. You can put down Windows Server, Active Directory, maybe certain firewalls that you're running, maybe an IPS that you're running. You've used Snort, you've used pfSense. Put that on your resume. Maybe you've set up PGP. Maybe you've set up IPsec VPNs. Maybe you've connected two different firewalls together using IPsec. Mention those firewalls. Mention IPsec. Put them in that list. So you should have a list of technologies that you are comfortable with. And if somebody brings up those technologies in the meeting, in the interview, you can talk about what you've done with them. They'll say, oh, I see here on the list that you've worked some with pfSense. You go, oh, yes, let me tell you what I did with pfSense in my home lab, downloaded it, installed it. You'll never believe what it found on my internet. There you go. So you give them a little bit of that internet clickbait. Like, you'll never believe what I found, and then you can tell them what you found. I plugged it into my network connection. Immediately it identified this application that I didn't know was running on my network, or I immediately identified attacks that were coming from the outside that are being blocked by the firewall, and you can describe how much was your system attacked from the outside. I was getting an attack packet every minute, every second, every 5 minutes, and I captured those packets and I broke down to find out, oh, this was this particular bot that was trying to find another machine to infect. You know, that's like a 10-minute story. 5 to 10 minutes where you're talking about your home lab, you're talking about a firewall, you're talking about a report you found, you're talking about the logs you went through, and then you talked about the research that you did to capture the packets and then identify what was in the captured packets. That's all in your home lab. You weren't even paid for that. You did that on your own. But that is a story that you need to show up in your interview so that you can then obviously be able to describe your experiences with that particular technology. And if you happen to have in a folder that you brought some of the reports that you generated on your pfSense, and you have the packet captures that you could show someone, how could we not hire you? That's the idea. So yes, absolutely put your home lab on your resume. Why would you not? I think it's a great idea. So feel free to have a look at those. Let's do some more. More questions that have come in. You keep bringing them in. Of course, you can follow the links on your screen to be able to add more questions to this list. If we keep going through there, there was somebody, I didn't do this in the first hour, and somebody was nice enough to mention this, is that I didn't give out a CEU code in that first hour. So what a better time to do it than right now. We'll do a CEU. So if you are someone who wants to use a continuing education unit credit to gain and gather webinar category CEUs, I would be glad to send you an email certifying that you are here. But you must follow these instructions. If you don't follow these instructions, I will not send you the email. You will not get credit. And if you're watching this on demand, you cannot use this for credit unless I've sent you this email. So the way that you would do this is go to the top or the bottom of the Professor Messer website. When you do that, there will be a link for Contact Us. Click that Contact Us link. In the form that comes up, put in your name, your email address. In the subject line, please put October 2023 so that I know where this came from. Helps me find it a little bit better. And then in the body of the message, on a line by itself, I want you to put the super secret code word of the month. And I'm gonna put one based on what we were working with earlier. The super secret code word of the month is NaNo, N-A-N-O, which, as we know now, is a fantastic editor to use inside of Linux. NaNo is your continuing education unit super secret code word of the month. And then if you also want to put anything else in that message that's being sent to me, you're more than welcome to do that. I do read through every single one of these. I unfortunately am not able to respond back personally to every single one of them because we get hundreds of these CEUs coming in every month. So I would, that's your process. So go to the top or the bottom of the Professor Messer website, click the Contact Us link, put in your name, your email address, in the subject line, put October 2023, and in the body of the message on a line by itself, put the super secret code word of the month, NaNo. NaNo is your super secret code word of the month. Thank you for mentioning that. I think Ben sent me a note on that. So thank you, Ben, for reminding me, because apparently I'm not easily reminded these days for doing that. So got to get back into the mode, right? Been away too long. We can't let that happen again and be familiar with these. Let's talk about things to know and things you should study. I think those are, everybody has this as top of mind. Should I know this? Should I know that? Should I know this? Should I know that? And there's a lot of this that we should go through. The question that I have that has come in, let me find the right one that is here, because this is a lot of people take their Core 1 exam and they are amazed at the amount of information they have to memorize. For example, they are surprised at the number of port numbers they need to know on their Core 1 exam. There's a list of like 15 port numbers you need to know. And if you've never worked with port numbers before, then it really is a lot of memorization. And so when you get to Core 2, people get worried that there's more port numbers they need to know. And Keegan even says, hey, which port numbers are important to know for the 1102? Well, I know how we can check. And the way that we could check is to go directly to the exam objectives for Core 2. Here they are. The exam objectives will tell you every port number you need to know. And if you start looking through the list, well, there's none there. Next page. Nope, no port numbers there. How about this page? No, there's no port numbers there. Let's do another page. How about here? Nope, no port numbers. Next page, no port numbers. Next page, no port numbers. Next page. I think you're seeing a trend here. And finally, we're at the end of the exam objective. There's no port numbers here. So the answer to your question of, hey, how many port numbers should I know for the exam? The answer is none. You don't have to know any for your exam. And this is one of the important things that I think you should take away from this, is that stick to the exam objectives. CompTIA has written up a comprehensive list of everything they would possibly ask you on the exam, and they stay very, 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 very close to this list, if not exclusively to this list. They rarely if ever, come off of this list. And so that's why I tell you, if you know everything that's in the exam objectives, you're going to pass your exam because they don't ask you anything else. Now, you may find, in fact, I have other publishers that have told people, oh, no, they could ask you anything. Well, they could, but they don't. Like, of course they can ask you anything, but they don't. They stick to the objectives. And I don't know why people tend to say that it's different than that. It's not. It's very clear when you take the exam that everything being asked of you was in that list of bullets. It is a comprehensive list. It tells you everything you need to know, and I highly recommend you use that as the arbiter of should I study it or should I not study it. Go to the exam objectives. You go to the list. If it's on the list, you should study it. If it's not on the list, don't waste your time. Now, are there other topics in technology that would be important for you to know as you begin your path into the world of IT? Of course there is. But what we're doing here is we're focusing on getting you through this exam. Once you're through the exam, you can come back and I'll tell you a lot of other stuff you should probably know before you jump into your first job in IT. But for the purposes of earning your A+ certification, stick to the objectives and you'll be fine. Not a problem there at all. Let's do some more questions. I've got others in this list. Let's see what else is here. What else? I've got a few questions that have come in, especially this. We had a question kind of on number of points earlier, and this is probably a good one to bring up from Manuel, who asks, I'm new here. Don't know if this question's been answered already, but are there any questions on CompTIA, especially A+ exam, that carry more weight in terms of points than others? For example, one question might be worth 5 points, while another is worth 3 points. Well, Manuel, you have exactly explained the process that CompTIA uses on their exams. As we know it, we know very little. We know very little about the way that these exams are graded. We know practically nothing about the internals of it. But what we do know is that each question is worth a different number of points. That's it. That's about the extent of what we know about the number of points. We know that there is a range between 100 and 900. We know that you have to score a certain number within that range to pass. You need the 700, for example, on the Core 2 exam. But we don't know, and we will never know, how many points a specific question was worth. We don't know. They will not tell us. You will never know. I mentioned earlier about mysteries of the universe. That's one of the mysteries of the universe. You will never, ever know for your entire life what that question, how many points that question was worth, because there's no way to know how many points that question was worth. They don't tell you, and you don't know. And that's just the way it ends up. Some people have posited that the performance-based questions are worth more than the multiple choice-based questions. I don't know if that's exactly accurate either. There's no way for us to know that. That is pure speculation. And also, you can get through more multiple choice questions in the same time frame as a single performance-based question. So is it really appropriate to compare them one-to-one? And if it's not appropriate to compare them one-to-one, how many multiple choice-based questions effectively equal a performance-based question? Or do they? So we don't know. Now you can start to see the complexities. We're now just guessing. We're now just sort of throwing things out into the universe, and we're just hoping them to be true. We don't know. We have no idea, and they won't tell us, and we'll never know. So my recommendation, as far as understanding how many points is a question worth, how do they do the grading process, do certain types of questions, are they worth more than other types of questions? The answer is it doesn't matter. The answer is yes, they are, but we don't know what those are. So therefore, should we really bother going through that process of trying to figure it out? Because we don't know. We will never know. And it's interesting, I guess, to think about, but don't do any more than that. Don't waste any more time than what we just did. You're done now. We've now gone through everything you need to know. We've gone through everything you do know. and there's no more information to give. So I would recommend don't worry about it. Do the best you can on your exam, and the grade will effectively take care of itself. So don't worry about wagging the dog. You focus on the exam objectives. You focus on knowing everything that's on that list. The score will take care of itself when you hit the final button. So that's the real key. Other questions. Let's do some more. Let's see if I have a list of those. In fact, there are a number of questions that are here. This is I'm not sure about this question, but I'm gonna. So of course I'm gonna put it up on the screen. It's from Steven, who asks, "Do you have any intention of creating your own school like CompTIA?" I didn't realize CompTIA had their own school. I guess they do. They do their own live training, right? So I guess in some ways they have their own school, which I think would be explicitly designed for students to get better understanding of the various courses than the other institutions. I don't have any plans to do live training, like in a training class type scenario. There's no plans of that right now anyway. My goal is to focus on providing video on demand that we have now. And we've been doing this for almost 15 years, where we'll just create the course. We'll put it out to the world. It's on YouTube. You don't need to register. It's not behind a paywall. We don't hold any of the videos back. We just put all the videos out there. And the entire course is available for you to watch online. So you have all the resources that you could use to begin studying for these exams with the videos that we post freely available on YouTube. And you can stream them as much as you want and watch every single one of them as much as you would like. I don't have any plans to do any live or in-person training. That's just not part of what we do. There's plenty of places you can go to get that. Not something we're focusing on at the moment. And CompTIA does provide those. So there is some of that. CompTIA does that. There's a lot of third-party companies that provide both in-person and online training in a classroom setting. So those are certainly available, but not something that we have any plans on doing here at Messer Studios. I think we're going to focus on maintaining the idea of making you the highest quality video training courses available of any cost, and to have the highest quality notes, practice exams, and other training materials available that go beyond the scope of what someone else might provide. So for us, it's more about quality and about providing you with things that would best prepare you to take these exams. All of this would be on demand or on your own training. We don't have any plans currently to have any live or classroom-based training. So hopefully that's giving you the overview of where we are today. If you think I'm wrong and I should do something else, please tell me, because I'm always open for suggestions. There's always ways to make things better, and where we're focusing on those. So we'll see. We'll see what happens in the future. So this is what I try to avoid. In this case, it turned out okay. Anonymous sent me a note, says, "Hey, Professor, I took the exam yesterday, and the performance-based questions really caught me by surprise." Ha. Yes, they can. But I think you would agree, Anonymous, that the information in those performance-based questions was information that came directly from your exam objectives. So again, performance-based questions are just a different way to ask you about information that you already know. That's all they are. So I know a lot of people get very worried about them. They're concerned about there being a very complex set of screens and simulations and labs, and it's not quite that involved. It's not quite that complex. In this case, Anonymous says, "I still passed with a 722. I'm really happy," and we're happy for you as well. You know, it doesn't matter what the score is as long as it's good enough to get over the minimum number. You are just as Security Plus certified or A Plus certified or Network Plus certified with a 722 as you would be with a 900. So I often tell people, and very kidding when I say this, it's meant in jest and with a great deal of love. If somebody says, "I got an 800, I'm like, "Oh, you studied too much," because you didn't need to make that many points. And we're really just poking fun. It's great that you do a score that great. You should strive to get as close to 900 as possible, of course. But the point I'm making is you only need to get up to that number. It's a pass-fail. And if you get over that number, you've passed. If you get under that number, you've failed. That's the most important metric. Everything else at that point, that's just gravy. That's the numbers you can use for touting how well you did on the exam. And I think you should. You got a 722. You should tell people I got well over the minimum number, passed my exam, and got the certification. Well done with that. Let's do some more questions. I've got time for a few more in this list. Others that are there. Here is a pretty good one. This one comes up quite a bit in our chat, so I think this is a pretty good one to talk about kind of generically. This is also from Anonymous, who says, most of the jobs out there always mention 2 to 3 years experience. 2 to 3 years experience. It's an entry-level position. You need 2 to 3 years experience. This is a position where you need that is designed to be our entry level into our company, and you need 2 to 3 years experience. I don't understand, but you're right. They do that. The question says, what is the best way to present yourself and your CV to get hired? So this is what I first always tell people when you see these job postings and they say it's an entry-level position, it's a junior help desk position, it's a first-level help desk position, but the job posting seems to ask for extensive experience and in some cases experience in other things. In those particular cases, I tell you just ignore that. If you feel that you are truly qualified for this particular position, send in your resume. Oh, but I don't have 2 to 3 years experience. I don't care. Send in your resume. You should not be the one making the decision that you're not going to get that job. You should automatically go into this like, I'm qualified. I'm going to go for the position. Now, if they decide to send you back a note and say, we aren't going to hire you because you don't have 2 to 3 years, that's on them. But you will find sometimes, and this happens all the time, and I'm speaking as a former manager who did tons of hiring and lots of interviews, is I tell people, you just send your resume in and let them make the decisions, because what will happen is they'll get this pile of resumes and then they realize there's only one person in here who has 2 to 3 years experience and we need to fill 5 positions. All right, well, okay, don't look at that one so much. Let's look at other criteria. And so they start breaking down these other criteria in different ways. So let them do that part. You think if you're looking at that job posting and you really feel, I know they're asking for 2 to 3 years experience and they want somebody who has a background in nuclear fission, but I think I'm qualified for everything else in this position, I say send your resume in. It is surprising, and you've probably seen this on the internet too, that some of these job postings ask for the moon. They ask for someone who has extensive experience and training and knowledge and backgrounds. In reality, they're just trying to fill the position. They're trying to get the highest quality response they can. But often what they do is they kind of price themselves out. They kind of overdo the requirements for this. So don't worry about that. Just go through and say, yes, I'm qualified for this. And then the second part of this question is, what's the best way to present yourself in your CV to get hired? Your curriculum vitae, for those of you in the U.S., we don't often call it a CV. We often just refer to it as our resume, but it's the same idea. And I have a couple of videos. They are in the YouTube video description of this video, which are 5 reasons your resume keeps getting rejected. And then I have a follow-up, which is 5 more reasons your resume keeps getting rejected. And it gives you some best practices when you're putting together your resume on things you should focus on and perhaps things you should not put into your resume. One of those, and I think it's pretty important, is to have a cover letter. Now, this is, by the way, greatly debated in the places where I go, because I am big on a cover letter, and not just a generic cover letter. And I think this is where people get a little confused about what I mean by this, is that I'm not saying create a generic cover letter. Here's a generic cover letter. To whom it may concern, thank you for allowing me to submit my application for this esteemed position. I look forward to speaking with you soon regarding my capabilities and how they may help you and your organization exceed your requirements in the coming years. Sincerely, Professor Messer. That was just a bunch of wasted space. It said nothing. It had nothing of any value. And one of the things that they allow when you're submitting your resume is they allow you to put a cover letter on. Why would you waste that time? Why would you waste the time for yourself and waste the time of the person who is reading the cover letter? The cover letter should be an opportunity to sell yourself on this job. Should be the opportunity to explain very succinctly why this resume you're about to look at is so far beyond the capabilities of other resumes that you'll find out there, that you need to hire this person. And so you need to create a cover letter. First, every cover letter for every job you submit needs to be customized. I'm not talking about spend an hour for every cover letter, but there needs to be a customization. And here's why. Because I recommend a cover letter style called a T-style cover letter. This is a cover letter that has an opening paragraph thing you can put on there. Thanks for submitting this. I've been watching your company for years. You can put a little note in there to the person who's looking at these. But the T style puts on the left side, here are the things this employer is looking for. And on the right side, you're listing your qualification for that. Oh, you need somebody who knows Active Directory, have been using Active Directory for this many years. You want somebody who understands Windows deployment. I led a Windows deployment project in my current position with 1,000 devices. You want somebody who does this? Here's what I did. So you've got these bullets that you're now showing on the cover letter. You've pulled 4 or 5 things out that they're looking for, and they're, interestingly enough, 4 or 5 of the most powerful parts of your resume, the things you know the best, and you're highlighting them right on that cover page. Before they've even looked at your resume, they already know that you meet 5 of the most important things that were in their job description. That's a good cover letter. Why wouldn't you build that and submit it with your resume? You need every possible strategic advantage you can get. And it's surprising to me how many people will say, well, I just don't even submit a cover letter. They don't read that. It's just a waste of time. Well, in some cases, they may not read it. That's absolutely true. I can agree with that. There may be times when they don't read your cover letter, but I'm not worried about those folks. I'm worried about the ones that do read the cover letters. If I have an opportunity to tout my capabilities, to blow my own horn, to make myself look better than someone else during the interview process, I'm absolutely going to take advantage of that. And a cover letter is one of the ways to make that happen. So in those videos I mentioned that are in my YouTube video description of this video, 5, I think it's the second one, 5 more ways to, 5 more reasons your resume keeps getting rejected. That's the one I think I put the T value of the cover letter in. I customize one in that video. I show you how I would put my own cover letter in there. So that's a good example of that. For example, people in the chat room saying, I just use ChatGPT for it. Please, I hope you do that, because if I put my resume in for the same job and I put my customized cover letter on there, it's going to crush the one that you created through this automatic pseudo AI piece of crap ChatGPT thing. It's never a good cover letter. It's just pointless. It's just filling space in the world. ChatGPT, for many purposes, is just a huge waste of time. It doesn't help you. It's not very good at the output it provides. And in many cases, it's just completely wrong. So don't do that either. What you want to do is make something customized. In fact, for everyone who's doing the automation part, you should be the one not doing the automation part, because every single time it's going to be a higher quality, it's going to be more applicable to what's going on, and it's something you wrote yourself. That's the beauty of that cover letter. So don't waste your time with the pablum and the nonsense coming from pseudo AI. It's not going to help you in your career, and it's certainly not going to help you get a job. So that's why I recommend that. That's one of the reasons I should probably put a stamp on my website that's got like AI with a no symbol through it, because when you're trying to learn this information, you're trying to get more knowledgeable with technology, you need something that is high quality, that's going to actually teach you the right things and how you should look at these, not something that produces some type of generic output that in many cases isn't accurate anyway. It's very, very important at this level that you try to focus on that. I say pseudo AI because the chat GPT is not AI. It's AI-ish, not truly a term. I'm calling it pseudo AI because it's not really AI. It's really just a quick lookup, putting things together of things it happens to know, but there's no intelligence to it. It's certainly A, but it's not an I. So we could just say it's A. It's some type of artificial for sure. Is it intelligent? Well, we've seen it is not. It's not even close. It's not good. And that's really the focus when I put these things together. So for your something as important as your resume, something as important as your cover letter, make sure you do it yourself. Make sure you spend the time to make it high quality and make sure it really is customized for the job that you're posting this for. Incredibly important. So really recommend that. And if you want to use A to do it, go use A, and you'll probably get as far as everybody else who's using A to make that happen. I don't think that's going to catch on, by the way. I don't think referring to it as A is going to work. I think that the marketing of that has just kind of fallen off a cliff. I tried there and it just didn't work. I used it and it didn't work. Let's keep doing another one. More questions. Oh, glad this. Have somebody in the chat room who even said, should I use ChatGPT to write cover letters to employers? I think we've gone through that one. We're going to just put that one in the archive. We don't even have to cover that one anymore and have it there. Waste of time. Enormous waste of time. Other questions. I'm going to scroll back here to the top. We're going to keep going through this list. You guys are great at sending these questions, by the way. I've got more than we will ever go through. I'm already at the top of the hour, so I can't go much longer, but we will do another couple here to be able to get this here. So I think this is a pretty good one to hit. This one's come in before. William asks, as a person with little to no funds, do you have any recommendations to be able to access or get experience using hardware or systems such as Apple products, especially Mac OS, for studying and or familiarity? You know, this is a real challenge for the Core 2 exam because, as you know, most of the Core 2 exam focuses on Windows, but it has a little bit of Linux in there and a little bit of Mac OS. And one of the challenges you have, of course, is that Apple's terms, their end user license agreement, only allows you to use Mac OS when it is on Apple hardware. And if you have Apple hardware, then you're probably already running Mac OS. So this is the challenge we have, is finding something to do that. Now, from the purposes of the Core 2 exam for A+, you don't need to have hands-on experience with Mac OS to be able to do this, to be able to pass this exam. They're going to talk in very broad terms about Mac OS. They're going to talk about different utilities that you might use in Mac OS, and you'll see the list of those. There's a finite list that's in the exam objectives. So you need to know about the keyring. You need to know about the Finder. You need to know about Time Machine. You know, there's things in Mac OS you need to know. But you don't necessarily have to be able to use them that way. Now, if you really, really, really wanted to get hands-on on those desktops, there are cloud-based providers that can rent you time on Mac OS. And they're not inexpensive, but they do provide you with a remote desktop, effectively front end, to be able to use Mac OS. I've used them myself, and they work fantastically. And I even think that I don't know if Microsoft is offering it yet in Azure. I know that AWS has options for Mac OS from a virtual desktop perspective, and there are standalone cloud-based Mac OS providers out there as well, where you can pay a certain amount or a month of time and be able to use that. If you really, really, really wanted time on Mac OS, you could do that. You might also want to spend time at your at maybe a Goodwill or a thrift shop that's near you. They may have an old Mac Mini or another Mac OS device. Even if it is years old, it's probably still running OS 10. So you could use what is effectively a relatively modern version of the macOS operating system, even if you're using a very, very old piece of hardware. May not update to the very latest version of macOS, but for the purposes of the Core 2, you just need something that will run a relatively recent version of macOS. It can be even 10 years old at this point, and you've pretty much got access to all of the things they want you to access: the keyring, the time machine, the all of the desktop features, everything that's in there, they expect you from there. But you've got a couple options there. I don't necessarily think you have to spend time on hands-on on macOS to be able to pass your Core 2. You can watch my videos where I'm demonstrating macOS and the features of that. And of course, you could go to YouTube and look for someone demonstrating the macOS desktop. It's another thing you could look at doing. We should probably make more of those on our site as well. But those are, I think, plenty. I don't think you necessarily need to touch the OS to be able to answer the questions in the Core 2 surrounding macOS. I think you're fine without having to do that. More questions. Let's keep going. It's one of those challenges, isn't it? Because I really feel like doing hands-on is so valuable. I mean, it sort of solidifies in your brain. It connects some synapses together when you're using the mouse and you're watching what's coming up when you type things into the command line. There's something about hands-on. So I don't want to say that you shouldn't use macOS, because there are certainly advantages to doing that, but you can get away with not doing it for the Core 2. I think that's fine. Other questions. Let's keep going. I'm well over time. We'll do at least one more here. Questions. I want to get a good one that's in here. Okay. This is a pretty good one. Since we're talking Core 2, I think this is a good one to talk about. Zachary asks, I noticed when studying for Core 2, there are some Windows settings differences on Windows 11 compared to Windows 10. Absolutely the case. Are we expected to know both methods to reach a particular setting on the exam? Well, now we have to make a decision about Windows 11 and Windows 12. And how would we know what we should be studying for the exam? Well, I bet you know the answer to this one already. It's your exam objectives. As I mentioned before, if you're ever wondering if a particular topic is on the exam, you've probably got the clue on what you should do inside of these exam objectives. So I'm going to go inside the first page of the exam objectives where they talk about the exam accreditation, the development, authorized materials use policy. They give you details about the exam itself. And then there is this last little paragraph on the third page that says, note on Windows 11. Versions of Microsoft Windows that are not end of mainstream support as determined by Microsoft up to and including Windows 11 are intended content areas of the certification. As such, objectives in which a specific version of Microsoft Windows is not indicated in the main objective title can include content related to Windows 10 and Windows 11 as it relates to the job role. All right, well, that long paragraph effectively says we need to know Windows 10 on the exam, but there's times when you'll also need to know Windows 11. And they will tell you, they say, as such, objectives in which a specific version of Windows is not indicated can include content related to Windows 10 and Windows 11. So if it doesn't specifically say Windows 10 in the exam objectives, then it could be 10 or 11. Or if it doesn't say Windows 11. I'll give you an example of this. This is this page of the exam objectives. Let's bring it up into a single page. Can I do Windows? There we go. So here's a single page. This is, we'll start here. Section 1.1, identify basic features of Microsoft Windows editions. And they specifically write Windows 10 editions. Notice they don't write Windows 11 editions. So what they're looking for in this exam is just the Windows 10 editions. Let's look at the next page. They say, given a scenario, use features and tools of the Microsoft Windows 10 operating system. So everything in here is about Windows 10. Next one down, given a scenario, use the appropriate Microsoft Windows 10 control panel utility. Therefore, everything in this section is specific to Windows 10. But if you keep going, here's another one that says, given a scenario, use the appropriate Windows settings. Well, that means Windows 10 and Windows 11. So we need to know both from that. How do you get to time and language and update and security and personalization in apps? In my course, because these things do change over time, I have put into this list everything that is specific to Windows 10 and Windows 11, so you really know the differences between those two. Now, fortunately, so much inside both of these operating systems is identical. So when you're learning the Windows 10, you're effectively learning the Windows 11 piece as well. But there are sections where in Windows 10, it's done one way. In Windows 10, it's Windows 11, it's slightly different. I do document both of those in my videos, so you know the differences there. So don't worry so much that there are differences. Look at the exam objectives, see what they would like you to know in the exam objectives, and I think you'll be fine. That's where you should focus your efforts. I think that's a good rule of thumb. Just go back to the exam objectives. It will tell you, it will point you in the right direction, and you'll be fine. Let's do one more because I'm just talking. We'll get going here and bringing these in. Let's go broadly. There was a broad question in here. I guess we could talk a little bit about this. This will kill some great time. This question's from Chris. This will kill some time. As some of you have sat through this before. Why did you get into IT? This is the question my parents continue to ask. And what was your second choice? Well, that's a really good question. I don't know, there is a second choice. Let me think about this a little bit. So let's first talk about the first part of this. Chris asks, why did you get into IT? As if he's saying, what's wrong with you? Well, let me tell you what's wrong with me, Chris. Thanks for asking. Why did I get into IT? I have always had an interest in technology. The weird and interesting part of this, of course, is that growing up, I did not have a lot of technology because there was not a lot of technology. We had black and white televisions back in the day. Black and white televisions, and then color came along, and we had running water, and I go back a number of years. But the idea of a home computer was one that suddenly appeared when I was in school, when I was in middle school, high school timeframe. And we started seeing more of consumer level home computing. So things like the TRS-80 Model 1, things like the PETs, things like the K-Pro CPM devices. Those were home-based systems. And we started to see a lot more of those show up. And I was infatuated with them. I was so curious about what these things can do. Didn't even understand the concept of spreadsheets or word processing or anything else. Certainly knew about video gaming because video gaming came along about the same time, where you would go to a video game arcade and put your quarters in to be able to play the games. We didn't have that technology at home until Atari and other companies made home-based console gaming systems. Rudimentary, but still fun nonetheless. So this technology sort of appeared in my formative years. And I thought this was some pretty cool stuff. Not understanding there was a career there, really just more of an interest in the technologies. And what I found was that the more I started looking at them and watching the industry and reading the magazines, and that was one of the best ways to get information about these technologies at that time, was getting magazines. There were tons of computer magazines that were coming out, and I would just buy all of them and read through them because they were relatively inexpensive, and I could at least get a flavor of what these technologies could do. And I just kind of kept my eye on these. Eventually started seeing computers in our schools, started seeing computers that were, inexpensive enough that you could purchase them for home. They were still pretty expensive at the time. And that was where I really got an interest in what's going on in there. What's behind the scenes? What's underneath the hood? During college, I got a job working for a state agency that compiled statistics on a certain part of what the government was providing. They had surveys that they would send out. The surveys would come back. We would key in the answers, and then we would run a statistical analysis on those surveys. I didn't run the analysis. People that had PhDs in statistics ran the analysis, but I ran the systems that ran the analysis. I also did all of the other pieces of data input for these. And so we had all of these home-based systems, these early versions of Intel processors running in these systems, the 8088s and the 8086s, and in some, we got an upgrade. We got one that was a 286. I mean, we had some of the fastest processors available for the time. And they taught us, because we were managing these systems, they sent us to a class on how to be a technician on these early systems. We took the cover off and they pointed inside and say, here's how you would electrocute yourself. And here's how you can avoid doing that. And here's what all these other components are. And here's how you can take them out and replace them to fix problems in the field. And so I was completely in love with that idea. Like, this is cool. Sort of like working on an engine, except instead of dealing with gas and oil, you're dealing with electricity and chips. And I thought, well, this is what I want to be. I want to be that type of mechanic. I want to be a computer mechanic. I didn't know what it was. I didn't understand there was still a career there. There weren't any specific technology majors coming up because technology was relatively new. But that was a big interest for me. I also got a job very soon afterwards working as an operator in at our university, and we had supercomputers and mainframe computers that were used in our computer science departments, and I got to be an operator and work behind the scenes on those. These were monstrous systems with enormous storage devices, and they took up an enormous room that was cooled air. That was when I first really started getting into the mechanics of this and realizing, wait, there's a whole industry of this. You know, it took me a while to figure this out. There's a whole industry of this. We needed people that understood how to program them. You needed people that understood how to build them, people that understood how to maintain them. You had to have people that would monitor them and make sure that they ran properly. You need operators to be able to grab output and post tapes onto the tape drives. All of that was important. And so that kind of gave me that initial spark to think, maybe there's a career in doing this. Maybe I could do this for a living. Got my degree from my university in business management, not a technical degree, but managed to find a company in South Florida that would hire me as a field service technician. And that really was my first a post-college professional job, was as a field service technician. Now, those of you that have done field service technician, you know there's the help desk, and then below that is field service technician. So that's what I did. I was below a help desk. I would start in the morning. I'd grab all the stuff I needed throughout the day. And because I was field service, I would put it in my car and I would drive from place to place throughout the day to update a motherboard, replace a hard drive, upgrade the memory, and do all of that. It is not above the help desk. It is well below trust me. You have to trust me on this one. Well below the help desk. So that was interesting because you learn a lot. You see a lot of different systems. You work with a lot of different companies. You meet a lot of different people, and you're doing a lot of different technical tasks. Interestingly, it was me driving around and meeting all these companies that got me to know the people that I was working with. And I ended up asking them, this is a nice place. Look at this. You guys got a nice building. You got a lot of nice computers. I'd love to work somewhere like this. Do you guys have open positions? I go, yeah, we have a help desk that you might apply to. And that's what I did. And so sort of moved up into the corporate ranks of a corporate help desk. That's kind of where I started. So that kind of got me into IT, and that sort of got all of this going. There's another long part of the story that we can all talk about at some other time that describes where it went from there. But that was the jumping off point. It was really getting my foot in the door somewhere. I came from North Florida and moved to South Florida to take that job as a field service tech, making $19,500 a year when I did that. Seriously, that was how much I made. And after 6 months, I got a promotion that got me to $21,500 a year. I got an extra $2,000 a year. And so that's probably why I mentioned it's below help desk. At least the pay was below help desk. But I was happy to have it. I was happy to get my foot in the door. I was happy to be somewhere where I was learning this technology because it was all new to me. And I think that sometimes we forget that part of it. We're so focused on what we want to do down the road, where we want to ultimately get to. Well, I'm trying to get to the cybersecurity part. Well, first, you need to know operating systems. You need to know hardware. You need to know networking. You know, there's a place you have to start with all of these. And I was happy to get my foot in the door so I could start. The other part that I think was really important in my career and moving up through the ranks, that's what I wanted to do with my career, was I moved from company to company about every 3 to 5 years. So I would stay in a company for a good amount of time, for 3 years, for 5 years. My last job, I was there 7 years. And after 3 years or so, you learn everything you need to learn about the technology of that company. You become, I wouldn't say everything you need to learn, but you become very comfortable with the technology of that organization. You become very comfortable with the processes. You become very comfortable with the software and the hardware that you're using. And you get into kind of an easy mode of knowing the answers to all of the questions and understanding the history of where these things came from. And really that was important for me to recognize, because if you're ever in a position where you're really comfortable in your job, you're in the wrong job, especially with IT, but this really kind of applies anywhere. If you are that comfortable, you need to move up and out. And so that might be a notice to you that maybe I should start looking around at other jobs where I'm not as comfortable, where I am learning new things, where I am becoming more knowledgeable with the things that I know, because IT allows us to do this. We're very fortunate because not all industries allow you to do this. If you go to medical school and you spend 8 years getting a medical degree, and your medical degree is focused on hands, they're doctors that are very good. They're at hands. They take care of anything relating to hands. Okay, well, after 3 years there, and you want to do something else, you want to upgrade to wrists, you want to upgrade to elbows. I don't know what they upgrade to. I'm not a doctor. But let's say you want to do something else. You can't. You spent 8 years being a hand guy. You're the hand surgeon. Now you're a surgeon. You're doing pretty well, but you better enjoy working on hands, because that's all you're going to do. Maybe you could do a wrist. Maybe that's your concentric diversification, is you can expand out to the wrist, but that's about it. In IT, you don't have this limitation. In IT, you could be any part of IT. You could be working on the network side today and then move into security, or move into databases, or move into data, or move into cloud, or move into whatever it is that interests you. And that is the most important part. Find the thing that interests you. And something I was watching today or yesterday really made a good point about this, is that everybody, in IT we hear this a lot, but every career has a certain level of uncomfortableness to it. You're always going to be someone who is trying to learn all of the things around you. And a lot of the times we're very concerned about this because we have a really bad cases sometimes of imposter syndrome, where we really don't think we're qualified for this, but just don't tell anybody. If we don't tell anybody, they'll never realize that we really shouldn't be here. But eventually, I think they're going to figure out that I'm not as smart as they think I am. We all think this in every job that we're at, is imposter syndrome. And it's not just an IT thing. It really is everywhere. Well, guess what? Everybody's having the same thoughts. We're all having imposter syndrome. We're just not saying it, but we're all there. We should be uncomfortable, though. It really helps you, motivate you to learn the things you don't learn, so that you can then be the expert in that particular area. And what you do is you just keep learning things, and you start compiling all of this knowledge that you have learned through the years. Now suddenly you can level up. You can move to a different company. You can get in a different job in your same company. You can now have something where there's new things to learn, where there's more that you can be uncomfortable with, where you can be an even bigger imposter than you were before. You should be striving for this level of uncomfortable time that you're in that particular job. We're all doing it. And it's a normal part of what we do. if you're, and I can't stress this enough, if you're ever in a position where you're no longer worried about being an imposter, you're in the wrong job. You need to go get a new job and be the imposter again. I think it's important if you're someone who is really in a position where you want to do more, then you should really keep a check on that. Now, not everybody is that way. You will run across people in your career that aren't really interested in moving up. They're very comfortable. They've been doing this in the same job for 10 years, for 20 years. I've talked to some people that worked with people in the help desk, and they've been on the help desk for 10 years. The help desk was never designed for that. That's not what we're doing at the help desk. You're not supposed to be there 10 years, but they got there and they were super comfortable and they just didn't want to go anywhere else. It's hard to argue with that, though. If that's what they want to do, I guess we can let them do that. But from my perspective, I wanted to keep moving up. I love technology. I want to know more about the technology. And in my career, and we've talked about this in other groups, at one point I transitioned over into management of technical people. And I realized very quickly, well, I don't like that at all. I like the technical side. I like the keyboard typing part. I like the mouse clicking part. I don't like the part where I'm babysitting or needing to find other ways to manage people. I just wasn't interested in doing the annual reports and all of the things that comes with it. I wanted to fix the problems. And I think that in my mind is where I most focus on in IT is I love problem solving. And if you want to problem solve, you need to be someone who's on the technical side. As it turns out, with technology, you can keep moving up the ranks and keep making more money on the technical side without ever being a manager. Find another job that allows you to do that. So IT in general just gives you a lot of freedom. It gives you a lot of ability to do whatever you want to do, to change your positions and the things that you do almost immediately. If you think one day, I'd really like to do more cloud stuff, you can go do that. There are ways to make that happen. Or if you're sitting there and thinking, really like to be in more security role, there are ways to make that happen. All you have to do is think about it, figure out a path, and then follow that path to get to that end. There's no other industry in the world that allows the level of flexibility and upward mobility that you have in IT. And that's just one of the reasons that we do whatever it is that we do here. Whatever this crazy experiment is, we like to do it because we think everybody should be in that position to be in control of their own destiny and to be able to continue to move up through the ranks to either be more comfortable in their daily life, to make more money, to provide for their family, or whatever your primary focus is for doing these things that we do in our careers. I think that's probably a good place to start. Chris, thank you for that question. I think that was a great way to kind of end today's study group. We've got a lot more of these study groups coming, of course. That's just this week. We did our Core 1 and Core 2. Come back next week on Tuesday and Thursday. We have our Network Plus and our Security Plus study groups. I haven't actually written the questions for those yet, so it'll be new for all of us if you come back next week for that. You can always check the calendar to know when the next live event is going to be at professormesser.com/calendar. Thank you all for being here. We love doing these live streams. We can't do them without you, and you have such great questions and things to talk about in the second hour. We sure appreciate you joining us and helping us out with what some of those might be. Thanks for being here. We look forward to seeing you next week. Otherwise, we'll see you over on our Discord. Feel free to join us for the rest of the week at professormesser.com/Discord. Otherwise, we will see you next time on our Core 2 study group. Thanks, everybody.